Lee Summit is your destination for big city vibes and small town charm.
Head to the downtown Lee Summit Farmers Market, where local meets fresh. Then grab a cup of coffee and discover a variety of shops and boutiques just around the corner. Continue the fun in downtown Lee Summit.
Good evening, everyone. Would you please stand for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Heavenly Father, we are here as one body in order to come to a consensus. Please bless this meeting and guide us to have clear minds that are sensitive to the matters at hand and eager for resolution. We ask that you bless us and help us find the answers we seek, and let our principles guide the process. We pray for our first responders and our community, and keep all in our thoughts this holiday season. Amen.
Good evening again, everyone. No, I am not Mayor Baird. I am pinch hitting for him tonight. He will not join us. And I now call the December 12th, 2023 regular session, number 58 to order. Can I get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Hodges.
Here.
Councilmember Damaro.
Here.
Councilmember Pryor.
Here.
Councilmember Shields.
Here.
Councilmember Felker.
Here.
Councilmember Lovell.
Here.
Councilmember Edson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Lopez.
Here.
Mayor Baird.
Great, thank you. Meeting is established, called to order officially. Now we need to approve the agenda for tonight. And are there any amendments? No? Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Do I have the mayor's? I don't have his dashboard, but, okay. Motion's been made by Councilmember Shields, and we have a second by Councilmember Edson. And can we call the vote, please? Please record the vote. The agenda was approved unanimously. Thank you. Yes. All right, takes us to approval of the consent agenda.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Shields, and we have a second by Councilmember Edson. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none or seeing none, please cast your vote. Please record the vote. Consent agenda is approved unanimously, 8-0. Thank you. Takes us to council roundtable. Anybody that has anything that you want to bring up? A bunch pop up and then they went away. Anybody? Oh, yeah. Councilmember Shields. Yeah, please, thank you.
So lots of great holiday happenings in downtown. We had the 12-ish bars of Christmas, which I hear was extremely well attended. We also have Santa is going to be, I think, at the History Museum again on Saturday. So it's a great time to keep shopping local. And also it is the 6th night of Hanukkah, I believe. So happy Hanukkah, everyone.
Excellent, thank you. Councilmember Pryor.
Thank you. So the boot block is coming up Thursday through Saturday, and it benefits Lee Summit Social Services. And you can also, there is an online link where you can donate via Venmo if you cannot make it through downtown this weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Takes us, we're just moving along with the agenda tonight. Takes us to public comments. Do we have any public comments tonight? Pulling it out, I guess we'll wait a second. Thank you, appreciate it. Yes, please. You're free to come up. Before you begin, I will read some protocols. The public comment portion of the City Council meeting is a time where the public may address council on any matter listed in the council agenda for the meeting or directly related to the operations of the city of Lee Summit, except for those matters that are subject to a public hearing requiring a testimony to be sworn in. Each person wishing to provide public comment will be afforded 3 minutes to speak. Any person wishing to provide handouts or information materials to the mayor and the city council shall provide the materials to the city clerk, who will then distribute the information among the mayor pro tem tonight and the council members. So thank you.
Hedwig email document, the Hedwig seal of his survey. A couple of the important ones. Teresa Vollenweider, 5201 Northeast Maybrook Road. I'm going to kind of start off where I left off last week. That would be people that, everybody know what an original survey is?
I think at this point, we'll just allow you to make a presentation and not ask questions.
Was the original survey. That part in roads. Parcels, you have that monument, that rebar had to be set, that pin had to be belonged to somebody else at the time. What controls? After this is a reprint of the original. I don't care if it's 2022. 99 survey controls. Oh. The important thing here is to know allowing Doug Horn, who wanted to buy this, options for easements. Could have taken both of them if he wanted, but he only took one. Access easement B. All the way along here. Wanted a way to walk to his property. I'd take access easement A. I own all the way to the pin in the road at the 90-degree bend. Back along the quarter line. Hamline owned that. I bought Hamline's property. I own that. And I can convey that to somebody else. As an easement, or I could divide it if I wanted to and sell it. But I own that. I'll stop there. The next time we'll talk about Brant Ladwig's survey, since it was used in the ordinance as a supporting document, the rezoning of 5261 from ag to residential large lot.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. I don't see any other public comments tonight. Okay, thank you.
I wish more people would speak.
that takes us to, we have a couple presentations this evening. First one is Mr. Ryan Murray, Citizen Survey Overview and Kickoff.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council for having me this evening. Over the last couple months, I've had the pleasure to work with your executive team, including your city manager, some of the assistant city managers and department directors on the 2024 Lee Summit Citizen Survey. I think there are a couple familiar faces from 2019 when I presented those survey results, but that was the last time we've conducted the survey. You know, a lot of our clients really paused things during COVID. We did a few Lee Summit water utility surveys. During that time and before this survey, we've done 5 other community surveys for which we'll be able to provide some trend comparisons. So for those of you who aren't overly familiar with our firm, we're ETC Institute. I'm the Assistant Director of Community Research there. Been there about 15 years on and off in different capacities, really closer to 20, but our business has been in business for 40 years, and for the last 35 years, we've really had a focus on municipal, county, and local government organizations, and that's really where we thrive, and that's kind of our niche market. And we do these surveys, as you can see, all over the country. We have a lot of clients here locally, obviously, and that's where you kind of see a concentration of some of those dots, but we've also got major hubs like North Carolina, Florida, and Texas that we do a lot of work in as well. So what we did is we basically took your 2019 survey, did a complete refresh, assessed and aligned it back to benchmarking best practices for 2024, and really we would just kind of wanted to give it a brief update to make sure that we were assessing the areas for which department directors want to most assess, so we can prioritize those service level areas that are most important to them, or most important for them to try to navigate when it comes to budgeting. The purpose of these surveys is really an objective assessment of your overall services. There will be within the survey department level services for which we'll assess, but there's a major categories of city services that'll kind of help align where we need to focus, and then from there we'll go to those department level results to help kind of understand where action plans maybe should be developed or where we need to focus developing some budgetary items for the next budget. We're also going to help compare your results. As I mentioned previously, we do a lot of work nationwide, but we've also got a Kansas City metropolitan area average that we'll use to actually compare your results to other peer communities within the metro, and as a metro as the whole. We'll also have some regional and like-size comparisons as well that we'll provide for you all. We're going to measure trends, as I mentioned. We have those 5 previous surveys. I'll work with staff to make sure that we're aligning those trends appropriately. So much has changed since COVID that we've really been consulting our clients that any trends, downturns or upturns in service ratings are really negligible, just based on the time that it's been since the previous survey, but also having COVID in the middle there. What's really happened over COVID is a shift of the expectations that residents have for our services, and so the bar is kind of all over the place in some communities, and residents really let us know in those communities where we've not necessarily set the expectation, and we've just simply asked residents to kind of respond. However, based on past results, your Lee Summit water utility results, I'm sure the results are going to look pretty good, especially when we stack you up against competitors in the area. We're also going to help determine priorities for the community. I know in your packet you have the full survey instrument that's all ready to go. You'll see in there various groups of questions that have matrix-style questions where we're assessing satisfaction, and then we'll assess importance or emphasis after that, and that'll lead to important satisfaction analysis. So one thing that I like to preface with councils is that we're not nitpicking. We're going to develop priorities regardless of the results of the survey. So even if 100% of residents were satisfied with all of the services that we're going to ask them to rate, we'd still develop some prioritization of those services based on the design of the survey alone. When we talk about what makes the survey statistically valid, we're first going to collect the GIS shapefiles of the city's boundaries. We're going to purchase all residential addresses within the city's limits. That includes multifamily dwellings as well. And basically, we use a USPS master mailing list to purchase that list. From there, we'll randomize the list and select a random sample of residential households to be contacted. We'll complete 700 completed surveys with that randomly selected group. So we'll mail approximately 3,500 to 5,000 surveys out. We'll select about 5,000 addresses in total for our random sample. When we collect those 700 surveys, it's important for our firm not just to collect the surveys, but to ensure there's demographic and geographic representation within that. So we're going to use those maps to ensure the geographic representation is there. Everybody's survey is going to be harkened back to their home address, and then from that, we'll strip the actual address and we'll give you a block level location, and that way your planners and things like that will have some geocoded information without divulging the anonymity or the actual respondent's home address. But we're also going to make sure those demographic questions at the back of your survey are well aligned with Census Bureau results, and that's why I put the margin of error here, because we want to make sure that we're within that margin of error for all of those demographic features for which can be compared to the census. And so our margin of error is expected to be about 3.7% at the 95% level of confidence. And what that will mean is if we do this 100 times, 95 out of 100 times, we're going to get those same results plus or minus that margin of error of about 3.5%. When we combat bias, that's really our multimodal methodology. So we're first going to mail these surveys out. We're going to do some text messaging, some emailing, and you'll likely see social media ads as well as a part of that outreach. And now you may be saying to yourself, well, isn't there a random sample? Shouldn't there be a group of folks taking the survey and those who are not? That's completely correct. But we want to more broadly distribute the survey link. Anybody that's a part of the random sample will be not contacted, but they'll be tracked using their home address. Anybody that completes the survey that does not have a home address that was randomly sampled, that'll be held to a secondary sample or a non-random sample of respondents. We usually call that an anecdotal database, something to compare the statistically valid results with somebody that really wanted to or a choice participator in the survey. So you might have some critics or some really large opponents or proponents in the community that want to take the survey but weren't randomly selected. They'll have an opportunity to participate, but the results will be held separate from that random sample. And the random sample really helps ensure that there's no response bias. And we're going to have that multimodal, multi-follow-up approach to ensure that we're combating that response bias or the non-response bias from those households that are just least likely to complete the survey. We have a robust internal QA/QC process that our entire company, from our CEO all the way down to our researcher staff, is involved in, and we're going to make sure those data entry results, the paper surveys that come back, we're going to make sure that there's integrity to that data. We do a double data entry verification system check, and a manager checks about 10% of those by hand just to make sure everything's correct, and the online surveys are coded, and the QA process has already taken place for the online survey. I also want to share with you just general approach. Right now we're in task 1. We've designed the survey and we've finalized the sampling plan. We've got the full online survey ready to go. We've got the paper survey and the mayor's cover letter within your packet tonight. At this point, it's all online, but we still can make tweaks up until the point we're ready to print. When we talk about administration activities, I've already alluded to these, but we're going to randomly select households, mail them. We may mail a postcard as a follow-up to some of those households, but we're really gauging response rates in those initial contacts to see what's going to work best for the community, whether that be a focus on text or more social media ads or maybe even a second mailing of the full survey, just depending. Based on our work with Lee Summit Water Utilities, we're going to have a really good leg up in terms of sampling and outreach and what we need to do. We'll have a really good idea there. When we talk about the initial mailer envelope, I really like elected officials to know what that stuff looks like. Staff already knows, but I want to make sure that elected officials know, hey, you know, if you have a constituent walk up to you and say, hey, is this legitimate? Yes, we've seen this envelope. The QR code's going to be on there just to help kind of break that barrier down again, make it easier to respond. We're going to have a cover letter. It's going to be signed by Mayor Baird. That really helps legitimize the contact attempt. It'll help legitimize the overall survey. It'll have my contact information in case folks have questions. And what I've directed with staff is that if somebody calls me with a question I just cannot simply answer, I will work that up the chain to them. But 99 out of 100 times, I'm getting contacts about survey administration procedures, which I can handle myself. You'll notice at the bottom of the cover letter there's a line in Spanish for folks that prefer to complete the survey over the phone in Spanish. They can call us at a toll-free number. This is the actual printed version of the survey. While it looks a little bit stale, we've tested other methods, and we keep on reverting back to this one just because it seems to get the highest response rate from residents. This is only 2 pages of the entire 6-page document. So we've been able to kind of strip about a page of questions out of the back end of the survey just to kind of reduce this respondent burden and make sure that this thing doesn't take up to that 20 minutes that it took last time in 2019 for folks to take online. This will be the online survey. As you can see there, that's a picture of what I believe is Lakewood Lake. I'm pretty positive of that. Again, my contact information is there. Folks can enter to win at the end of the online or end of the paper survey, an opportunity to win a 500 Visa gift card for fully completing their responses. We'll randomly select and then reach out to one of those folks to give them that gift card. This is an example of what the postcard is likely to look like. Again, a QR code, some information on the back end, contact information, and the survey link. Social media ads will look something like this. We've got your Lee Summit one there. And then we've got the city of Evanston. I just wanted to provide you with a couple of examples. But really, it's going to be pretty bland. It's going to survey it's going to link directly into the survey. We really just want to make sure there's no barriers to participation. Some of the text messages you might see, I don't have these ready yet for your project, for this survey, but this is an example of what that Lee Summit water utility text looked like, and one that we did earlier this summer for the city of Oklahoma City. And the next steps, we're going to, based on tonight's meeting, as long as we don't have any final edits or changes or last second thoughts on the design of the survey or the questions we're asking, we're going to make sure that we're preparing and printing the surveys for an early January 2024 arrival. So we'll be printing the surveys in about the next week. We'll be stuffing those envelopes and delivering to the post office probably that week after Christmas, and the expectation they'll start arriving towards the latter end of that first week of January. It'll take us approximately 4 to 6 weeks to meet those geographic and demographic goals, as well as the 700 completed surveys. Any surveys collected above and beyond that 700 will be included in the final sample at no additional charge to the city. So I like to mention that while I'm here to make sure that you all know you can push out the link, you can push out the survey, you can push any kind of communication that you'd like regarding the survey just to heighten the overall response rate. We're going to select about 35 to 5,000 residents to complete the survey or to be part of the random sample. It's unlikely we get all 5,000 of those folks to participate, but I could very well see us reaching 1,000 with robust outreach efforts. So that's just something that I want to pose to the council. I know staff is already aware. The more surveys we get, basically it reduces the margin of error and heightens the reliability of the overall results for planning. And sometime in early spring, we'll have everything conducted. We'll have the survey wrapped up, administration complete. We'll write a findings report and deliver that to staff. From there, we'll start working on a presentation, and I'll be back here to present those results sometime in the spring. With that, I'll take any questions, or if you have questions later on, please just get those to staff, and I'll make sure to get a written response back to council.
Great, thank you. We do have a question. We have Councilmember DeMoro.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you for your presentation. I'm looking forward to some of the answers, but the one that kind of stumped me was 22, and that is the solid waste and trash pickup. We are actually not in the trash business or solid waste business. Most trash haulers hopefully would have a business license, and so I'm a little skeptical about the. I mean, there are people that don't have good trash service in Lee Summit, and I'm fully aware of that. But, I mean, there's not much we can do about that. So I was just wondering why that was included.
Yeah, that was through a discussion with staff, we determined that we wanted to assess that service. And then later on in the survey, or it might be right around there still, I apologize, I failed to grab a copy with me. We're asking some additional questions to try to help maybe push the idea that maybe the city could offer it in the future, maybe. So we're basically using the survey to try to help test at a scientific level some of the ideas. And so we want to assess those services as well as ask a couple of additional questions. Now, based on council's direction, we can definitely make changes to that section of the survey. But I think staff was requesting those particular questions to be included for some internal discussions that they're having as well.
Well, I mean, it's like the ability to choose different providers. We have nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
Somebody pick up a phone.
Yeah,
and,
there we go. My
make
backup
a phone
is here.
call. They can change providers.
Yeah,
They don't have to
I
go
don't want to
through us.
negate the responsibility. I helped craft the questions most definitely, but I'll let staff take care of this.
Mr. Park is very good in the
Yeah,
answers.
so you're right. We do not offer municipal curbside residential trash service, but we had heard feedback from the community and even some feedback from those of you on the dais that it might be a question we ask ourselves after the election as a possibility, and we felt this was a good test question of our community to see what gauge of interest there is. What are their priorities? Is their priority to reduce the number of trash collection services in their neighborhood over having trash collection choice? Is price a greater priority, or is it the services that are available to them through the market? And so this isn't a question of how much would it cost? Do you want to do residential trash service? But we framed it in a way to try to get a perspective of what our resident priorities are with regard to the residential trash hauling. Just some information to help us maybe digest a question that the council might have in the coming year or years, as a reflection of what our community finds most important with regard to residential trash service. Not saying that's where we're going or where we're headed, but I think information is always helpful.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Park.
Thank you, council member. And
Thank you.
one of the other things, and I appreciate Crystal bringing this up for me, one of the other things that I wanted to just mention about this particular question is that there was a lot of foresight, I thought, by staff to even mention this. You know, we went around and around and we're like, you know, we have a little bit of space, should we be using it? Are there any other questions for which we can gauge some interest in right now? And so the way that we designed this question was a way to make sure that we're gauging what's gonna be, you know, we want the cream to rise to the top there. And so we've asked folks to, based on, you know, multitude, 7 items potentially, to choose only 3 for us. And so we should have some semblance. We're hoping for an aggregate or some kind of consensus there that says, hey, you know, I'm most concerned about costs, delivery days, and then picking my service provider. And so that'll help guide staff in the future and hopefully guide some recommendations for you all as well.
So the top 3 would, like you said, rise to the top. And maybe those are the issues that we could take a look at then.
Exactly.
And determine
Yep.
what is on people's minds. Because I hear about it frequently, about trash service, and again, you know, there's not much, I really, my catch-all answer is change your provider and see if it is any better.
Yeah, and I'm a alderman in Greenwood, and we just signed for another trash service there, and so nobody gets a choice in our community, and we have loads of complaints as well. So it's a never-ending battle, I think, with trash, and you know, it's one of those things that if it doesn't get picked up, we get extremely frustrated, and that's probably the biggest item. But there were some conversations that we had with staff that were just so forward-thinking that you all should feel really lucky that you have such good staff, because they're thinking not only about like the trash service itself, but what it's doing to our roads and our maintenance costs and things like that. And those are all way forward-thinking things that this survey in 2024 might guide us to a decision, you know, in 2028 even. But it's really nice that we're asking it now. And if we don't make a decision between 24 and the next survey, you know, we could gauge again and see if priorities have changed. So, yeah, great question though. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Councilmember Felker.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and thank you, Mr. Murray. I remember you presented to us on the water utility survey. Appreciate your work on that, and looking forward to the feedback on this. You did mention, obviously, just a simple thing of trying to improve in terms of shortening the length. Any other specific things that you look back from 4 years ago and say, you know, we really wanted to do this different, whether from your perspective or your interaction with the staff, things that you wanted to do different?
I think we hit all the marks. You know, what I'd really like to do is offer a 3-page survey to respondents and do it a couple times a year and make it super complex and difficult for council to understand. But really what we're trying to do is assess at an extremely high level, you know, where should we prioritize investments? Where should we budget appropriately? And so we've really stripped the survey. And I don't know, I don't think we provided the previous survey, the 2019 one. But in lieu of that 22 there at the end, we had like a full half a page or 3/4 of a page of just these unique one-off questions. And they were probably pertinent at the time, but we've really stripped all of that out, and we just have this solid waste question now. So we've really been able to streamline the entire survey instrument, in my opinion. Now, the demographics and the response rates of your prior surveys really played a role in where I wanted to cut the line off. And, you know, I thought if we got to 6 pages, we'd be in the best shape that we could probably be in. Now, obviously, the shorter the survey, the higher the response rate. But in a community like Lee Summit, where we have engaged residents, we know response rates are strong. I don't think that there's any particular issue with 6 pages going out. And, you know, most recently, Olathe administers a 7-page survey quarterly, and they just finally went to a 3-page survey quarterly, but it's really about 9 pages of survey questions that are just splitting it up throughout the year. And so it's still lengthy, it's still a lot of questions for respondents to ask, but this should only take folks about 12 to 15 minutes based on the way we've structured it, which is considerably less than, I think I was looking at an average of about 20 to 22 minutes in 19 on the online version, so.
Great, thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Lovell.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I was just perusing the survey and was just curious. I don't see anything, and I don't know if this is even possible to do or how you might survey it, but just general consensus of development in the city. So like if we ever thought about considering, what the city is bringing in the community, whether it's uses, whether it's housing, whether it's, and getting some more feedback. I know we hear it a lot from our community citizens or constituents, whether it has to do with multifamily or whatever that might be. And I don't know how you could ask it, but it might be interesting to know what the general consensus there was. So I don't know if that's,
Yeah, we've been tiptoeing around the affordable housing question for a while now.
Yeah.
And the primary reason is it's so dependent. It's heavily dependent on what part of the city that you're from, your socioeconomic status, and all of those other factors. And so you might have, and this is what happened to me in Orange County, North Carolina, where the census block group with the highest level of dissatisfaction with the availability of affordable housing within the county was by far the highest income census block group in the entire county, which just didn't seem to make sense because we had poor rural areas to the north for which they were providing, on average about a 4 on a 5-point scale. And so one of the things that we've kind of taken an approach on, and something that I think we could probably get done in this survey without lengthening in it too much, is to add a panel survey question before our opt-in, before question 33. And so what we would do is ask, hey, would you be interested in providing additional contact information to potentially be contacted for a panel research group sponsored by the City of Lee Summit? And then I would work with staff to administer 3 to 4 surveys a year, about 5 to 6 questions each. And so what that does, and I'm doing that with City of Roland Park right now. We've done it for a few years with them with pretty good success. It's a significantly smaller community, so the overall numbers are low. But if we're able to collect like 1,000 surveys here, I'd say about 250 to 500 folks are going to sign up for that panel research. And then about a third to a half of those will actually respond to my survey contact attempts. And so one of the things that we could do is based on the results of the survey, if we see anything that we have questions on, or if we just want to go out simply with an affordable housing or a development type question, we can most certainly do that with the panel group. My recommendation is to allow this survey to act as kind of a gauge on our services, a gauge and perception survey.
I guess I'm less leaning towards like affordable housing,
But other developments.
more types
Yeah.
of development.
Yeah.
So like, do you
What
want
do
to
you
see
wanna
more
see more
single
of?
family
Yeah.
for sale? Do
Yeah.
you want to see more rental opportunities? Do you want to see more multifamily? So then you're getting into more like just philosophical, like how we want to develop the city, like commercial restaurants,
Yeah.
things like that. So
Yeah.
I think that would.
I've got
That would
samples.
eliminate some of
Yeah.
that kind of
Yeah.
demographic type thing and
Yep.
get kind of a better view of what our constituents are wanting. So
Yeah.
maybe something that size, and then something that angle. And then the only other thing I had a question about, so we'll send out 3,500 to 5,000, is that correct, surveys?
Yeah, I think we're going to select 5,000 randomly selected addresses. Now,
Okay.
some of those folks, about 3,500, are going to receive that survey to start, and we're going to test those other methods with the 1,500 others.
And so the question was, I was just, I think it's saying 700 completed surveys, like that's kind of the minimum to have.
Yep. Yep.
And then it says combating bias. So I was just curious, like, so then if you
Yeah.
got results back, you
Yeah.
have no, like, you're gonna, like, so how are you, I guess I'm just
Yeah.
trying to understand,
Yeah.
like, how you do that and then how the data comes back and then how you sort the data according to that, because you could get, anyway.
Yeah. So the response bias is really this issue with folks that are randomly selected and then just, hey, would you take a survey for us? On the first contact attempt, a lot of folks are going to say no. But who's going to say yes right away are going to be our higher income and specifically our retired residents in the community are going to immediately participate in the survey. So we're trying to gauge different methods to see what's going to be most effective with different segmentations or demographic segmentations. But what we're doing to combat the response bias is multiple follow-up attempts via different modes. And so if you don't respond to the paper survey, I'm going to know that you didn't respond to your paper survey, so I might send you a text. If you don't respond to the text in a couple weeks, I'll send you an email. If you don't do that, maybe I'll give you a phone call or I'll send you a postcard.
So in the results, would that demographic information be included in the results? So like, hey, we sent 3,500 out, and here are the responses we had. X was lower income,
Yeah.
household composition, or whatever.
Yeah,
And
all
then
those
that-
demographic features at the end will be quoted there, such as your age, how many people live in your home. 25 is a household makeup questions that's directly aligned to Census Bureau. 26 and 27 are race ethnicity. The employment status question is new. We'll do the own versus rent. Years lived in the city, which is a really good indicator on where folks are kind of drawing lines with satisfied. Newer residents, typically more satisfied, more established, can be a little bit more critical. And then income, making sure that the bell curve's kind of rising where your median income is. So the bias is more about the folks that are really hard to get to respond to data, like myself. Like, you could send me 5 surveys and $10 to complete one, and I'm unlikely to do it. We are going to beat down that person's door in an effort to make sure that the person that doesn't typically respond to this type of research, could potentially respond. So basically, we just don't want to take all the, we just don't want to skim the surface and get 700. We need to make sure first that the 700 are demographically and geographically representative of the city, which causes us frequently to go well above our goal. But beyond that, everybody's going to get multiple contact attempts most likely, including the social media that'll be running throughout administration, and that's what combats the non-response bias. So there might be bias in the respondent, like, hey, I don't like affordable housing, I'm going to rate that one down. That's the personal bias. We're not concerned about that.
You run into that. I just want to make sure
we're concerned
that
about sample bias.
Yeah, it's like a sample size that's reflective of.
Yeah, and some folks will always ask me, how does 700, match the opinions and views of all Lee Summit residents? And that's kind of a difficult pill to swallow sometimes, in my opinion. Now, there's a margin of error and a level of confidence to those results.
Well,
so
all we
that's
can do
important.
is put it out there and hope people
Yep.
respond and get some valuable feedback that we can take action on. So,
Yep.
thank you,
And
appreciate it.
beyond that, we're going
Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem.
to beat down the doors to make sure that we get those responses.
Thanks. We have Councilmember Hodges.
So I had a question about how do you guys ensure that people aren't just sitting there taking the survey over and over and over?
Yeah. I don't want to get into too many details here, but we have an algorithm that's constantly running on the back end of our data. So anybody that's going online and completing the survey, it's auto-populating our database on the back end on our servers. And there's multiple flags for that. We're tracking IP address. We're tracking how long the survey takes to complete. We've actually purchased a really expensive service that gives us all sorts of terrifying information on people's IP addresses. The respondent at the end of the online survey must provide an address. If an address is not provided, those surveys are scrapped. So there's multiple different methods to make sure that folks aren't completing the survey over and over and over, and that'll also include when did you start and when did you stop, and is that a multiple IP address? Does it belong to the library? Well, we don't need to worry as much about that, but if a survey, if somebody's taking a survey and it takes 5 minutes to complete, that's going to get a flag. And so we've got groups internally that are constantly going through and resolving these flags, and they're either kicking out surveys or sending them up for approval or review. And so we're making sure at a really high level that folks are not able to just kind of stuff the ballot box. And the greatest evidence that I have for that is Parks and Rec surveys. Really well-organized soccer, swim groups, and things like that across the country will try to bombard the survey with their results, and we'll easily just track where those are coming in and who are they're coming from. And we can determine right away that not all those folks were part of the random sample, and so they just kind of hold out into that secondary database.
Okay, so then on the flip side, if you've got a home with 5 adults in it and they all take it on the same computer, how do you decipher which ones to kick out? Because they all have opinions. So.
Yep. So what we want to do is hopefully folks are taking the survey for their household as best as possible. So if somebody completes a survey via paper and we've received the paper survey, no other online surveys will be collected for that particular address in the random sample.
So it's just one survey per address.
One per
Will that
survey
be
per address.
stated on things so people aren't wasting their time, and then so also they know?
Yeah.
Just because I'm curious, because I mean, if a husband and wife, they're going to spend their time, and only one is counting, but they have different opinions.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say that they're not counted, because we're going to deliver that secondary database of all those secondary results. So the paper survey will trump any other online surveys completed, and we select the first online survey for a given address, and all the others are held separately. So we definitely could change some of the language in the cover letter to say, hey, only one survey per household or residential address will be collected. And that would be a pretty quick and easy add to the cover letter, just to make sure that folks are kind of aware of that.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yep, and then to council members' levels of point, I'll share with staff one of our development questions where we have that more or less scaling, and we'll just see if we want to incorporate that towards the end of the survey.
I don't see any other questions. A couple comments on my part. Thank you again for making this presentation tonight. And thanks for you and staff making the questions easy for council members to understand.
Yeah.
So, but in all seriousness, I know your firm has a good reputation, good track record in our community. So I know that you all will do your best, along with staff, to make sure we have the right data collected. So that's reassuring. Your track record. Also, I think the panel survey, I think, would be a good thing to be more inclusive and get better sampling. So, with that being said, I don't see any other questions, so thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. If anybody has anything, just make sure staff gets it and they'll pass it along. Thank you.
Thanks.
All. This was a pleasure.
That takes us to the next agenda item, which is a presentation. I see Mr. Peterson coming down for a conceptual economic development incentive request for Project Shamrock, 635 Holdings LLC, and TriStar Properties are the applicants. And Mr. Bushek, I think you're kicking it off.
Yes,
It's a conceptual.
correct. David Bushek, Chief Counsel of Economic Development and Planning. There was a conceptual presentation that was made to the City Council in December of last year for redevelopment of the Shamrock Golf Course. There was also a conceptual presentation in May of this year by the TriStar development. You'll understand how those fit into this conceptual presentation tonight. This is a conceptual presentation for both of those projects together, along with other property that has been added to the project. So it's now a very large project, both of those conceptuals combined into this project, plus some additional property. And we'll have the developer speak first, and I'll provide my comments.
Great, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Lopez and Councilman. Kurt Peterson here on behalf of 635 Holdings LLC, who is the proposed master developer for the overall site. The founder, Rob Heineman, who was here last time we did this about a year ago, is not here, but he has a really, really good excuse. The serious part is he has spent unbelievable amounts of time and money over the last year on this, but he has a higher calling. His daughter needed him, so he flew out to the West Coast unexpectedly, and that's where he is right now. I know you all understand, and he will be back shortly to have full attention on this project, but that's why he has an excused absence tonight. TriStar Properties, I cannot remember if in front of this group I've introduced Matt Siegel before, but he's sitting back behind me representing TriStar. Also have a very important person. We don't always introduce the design team, but Continental Engineering, who all of you know well, their role in this city and all the development here. Brian Lavery has played a huge role, along with Phil Gibbs Jr., over the last, really, 6 or 7 months. And so I wanted him to be here, and there could be questions that we tap him for, but he's played a huge role, so I wanted him to also be in the first few rows with us. So over the last year, as staff said, there were 2 separate conceptuals related to what is now this master project. And a lot of this I have in your packet just because I've been told before, you have a few things on your mind as council, so just because we did this before doesn't mean you remember every detail. So I'm not going to go in great detail on what we covered before, but I put it in the packet so you at least have it and can reference it. So on the screen, what you're seeing is a little bit of biographic material on 635 Holdings and Luke Draley Construction. In the original presentation a year ago, they were focusing on residential development, commercial development, entertainment, and then also Parks Department as a possible site for their field house and workout facility. And that, again, anytime I mention parks, I'll say it one time and then not say it every time. The Parks Board has been hard at work in trying to find a home that is a piece of land to build this, what will be a wonderful field house facility. And this is one of the top sites per Joe, who's here, Joe Snook, your very own. And but that decision has not been made. But I'll speak to it as this is a prime site because I know it is and something the board is considering very closely. TriStar, also on the screen, has been proposing 2 multifamily housing projects. One that it's a cutting edge sort of, I'd call it new urbanism courtyard villas for 55 plus, so another version of senior for this community, and then also associated townhomes that fit nicely with that project. So I'm not going to read anything on the screen. I will just say anytime you see a B as in billion, usually around dollars, or $500 million, billion plus, you're talking about somebody that has credibility. There's no way to really fake that. So bottom line here is, before I move on, we have parties at the table here wanting to do something great in this city that have great credibility, resumes, and expertise. So again, I'm not going to stop on each one of these. You've seen these images before. These are images of other projects that these parties that I just introduced that are leading the way have been a part of. It gives you really just a glimpse of what they've been a part of. But again, I'm trying to show quality and experience for these parties getting ready to make hopefully a large investment in the city. So in working with staff over really since these two conceptual presentations that staff and I referenced, I should say, we started discussing the idea of consolidating these two projects because there was so much synergy here. Not only consolidating, once we start doing that and getting the big picture thinking going, we said, why are we not going bigger? So why don't we tackle the whole corridor all the way down to 150? And so that's the endeavor that we went on together. And we encountered along the way, some of you already know this very well, even because of your industry, your background, or because you just are a council person that pays attention, that you are not surprised to know we encountered incredibly high public infrastructure costs to try to activate that entire corridor. So we also learned something else from staff that honestly I had not had personal knowledge of, which is other developers, other brokers, and staff had already identified people that had tried to do at least a portion of this corridor before and had kept running into the same exact problem. They couldn't figure out how to build cool, exciting, engaging improvements without swallowing public improvement costs that they just couldn't bear for the project. Every single other party had thrown in the towel before us. But of course, hubris, we kept going, kept trying to figure it out. So over the last year, this group spent a lot of time, and I will say a lot of money, on professionals studying the infrastructure needs and finding ways to make construction of that infrastructure not only physically possible to make it function well, but also to bring the corridor to life in a financially feasible way. I will say, professional staff did spend a lot of time on this. There was a lot of meetings, there was a lot of analysis that, frankly, there's just intimate knowledge from Mr. Park to Jeff to everybody that was able to put in to this because it's multifaceted, right? And everybody put in their thoughts, which is leading to what I'm about to present to you. So now, as a result of all that work, we're coming back before you, what I would call with a consolidated second conceptual presentation, much larger. This master development project is much larger than before, and it has a very detailed proposed public-private partnership to make all this happen and get past these hurdles of the public infrastructure. So on the screen in front of you, looks like a spaghetti map, colored spaghetti, but this is what I want to dive into right now. This is the master site plan, the latest version. This one piece of paper is months and months in the making. It's really our conceptual roadmap is what I'd call. Actually, funny, I say roadmap. That would be a double meaning dad joke. It is very much about roads, but there's more going on here than just roads, but very much focused on road infrastructure. And so as I briefly mentioned, we began exploring bringing this project just from the Shamrock Golf Course down to TriStar, and then we went down all the way to 150 from there. And that's when we encountered all these infrastructure costs. And chief among those, as I just said, was the public street infrastructure to make it align with the street's sort of master street plan for how all this land should function with cars. And so the red lines that you see on the screen are the additional public streets that are needed, with the most significant and important, I'm going to call it out with my cursor. We call it Arterial A. As you can imagine, it's an arterial street, and it runs from 150 up through the spine of this master development. Now, the importance of this is for circulating cars efficiently and safely to all parts of the development, but also it works to take traffic off of the outer road, which all of us know, the outer road that runs up from 150 along 291 all the way up to Hook. And eventually, at the right moment, there's, again, all these things I could talk to for 10 minutes on each bullet point, but eventually it leads to, at the appropriate time, to getting rid of the outer road. And that's what that arterial's main job is eventually. So you'll see that we have carved up this overall site. I know it's a little small, but we wanted to get it in one image into numbers. Those numbers represent phases, well thought out phases of development. And of course, then we worked with the engineers, both the cities and developers engineers, to figure out how do you phase infrastructure. Nobody can do infrastructure like this all at once. And how do you tie it to various phases of development? So we worked closely as we did that with a highly respected retail, he's a broker, commercial real estate broker, but really good at retail. Represents many of the top retailers that I'd say their names, you'd be like, wow, really, that one? He's highly respected. Worked with him for some 17 years. And we went to him to help us study what we call the submarket. This area, right, Southern Lee Summit right here. Who's not here, who might come here, what makes sense at this site given other retailers that are around and where the demand is and where development is going in terms of residential, et cetera, in the corridor. We wanted to be smart about our programming assumptions, what we tell you we think we may want to bring to these different phases. So as I say that, I have to emphasize a theme that I have said and others have said and you've experienced to be true, which is retail is hard. New buildings and bringing great retailers is really, really hard. It's been that way for a while now. And honestly, none of us see it getting easier. But I say that not as a Debbie Downer. I say that in that we're excited. And we're spending real money because we think we have a real and pragmatic vision to bring both commercial, retail, and residential to this master development. Okay, quickly, I'm going to go through, not in a great amount of detail. You can ask me questions, we can go deeper. But I'm going to walk through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And you can look at the map and you can see the areas I'm talking about. I'm going to say what we've conceived would go in each phase. Phase 1, up there, that is the TriStar mixed multifamily, including that 55-plus targeted new urbanistic villas. You can tell what I'm excited about with that. I think that's going to be excellent. Phase 2 is down at the hard corner of 291 and 150. This is envisioned to be a small format grocer, restaurants, retailers, and possibly some small office space. Phase 3 is here. See, that's just south of this public street that goes along with the TriStar. Phase 3 is where we would envision and where we've been talking to Parks Department for the field house and the fitness facility. Phase 4, right next to that, is where we envision a sports entertainment facility. I can unpack that, the idea of golf driving range, things like that would go along with it. Entertainment, also a hotel that would have direct synergy with the tournaments that would take place at the tournament facility, at the field house, and then also a medical office building. Phase 5 is multifamily. Phase 6 is envisioned right down here as the final phase of retail with a substantial anchor tenant. Restaurants, retailers, and again, possibly to fill it out per usual, some small office space. Phase 7 is the back of the golf course, which was always envisioned as single family. And then phase 8 would be finishing, bringing some more rooftops through some sort of mixed multifamily residential. Once we identified these phases of the master development, we started working really closely with our traffic engineer and our civil engineer that I already introduced from Continental to understand how all of this public infrastructure that has to go in to make everything I just said become a reality, how do you make it work? How do you correspond it and make it happen in a corresponding way in time? And when all was said and done and we got initial estimates, because this is what we do, we figure out what we need, what functions, then how much does it cost. The price tag came to, in today's dollars right now, an estimated $22 million for the public infrastructure that you're looking at on the screen. It's a lot of money. As you probably just know intuitively, a development like this, particularly one that has a lot of retail and commercial, absolutely cannot, will not, has never supported that much public infrastructure. It will not happen. So I wanted to not just focus on the public infrastructure and take about 30 seconds and zoom out and give you a sense of what kind of overall capital investment, order of magnitude, does something like this bring the city. So I know this is really small. In just 2 seconds, I'm going to zoom in. But to give you a sense, this is a high-level project budget for everything from the land acquisition to the site infrastructure costs, all the public infrastructure we talked about, that $22 million, to the building construction, to the soft cost, et cetera, down the line. And that comes up to about $420 million. So it kind of gets your head around other big projects that we've approved or seen in Lee Summit. It's up there. It's one of the big ones. But because that's hard to read, I want to zoom in on that and break it down. So there are 3 high-level sources of funds to bring the $420 million, and that's a very good estimate, but it'll be It'll be something close to that, but I'll keep saying over $400 million of investment. The three buckets to provide funding are one, private capital, which is both people borrowing money and putting in their own cash, their equity. Second is the city park sales tax that has been, as I understand from the very beginning, was one of the main purposes of that was going to be to build this fieldhouse facility. And then third is public incentives. So the next natural thing to walk through is the overall incentives, the third item there, the third funding source, and give it a little bit of color. So first, I want to divide up to be well organized into, you heard there's two parts. There's commercial and there's residential components to the new master development. So starting with the commercial side, the goal of the commercial incentives is to generate financial assistance for two things. First is, and primarily, over 3/4 of it is for those public uses, those public infrastructure, et cetera. And second is to induce some key users. Induce meaning we as a council, and this isn't a tonight like nitty gritty, but we as a council say, yes, want the master development. I know I need the public infrastructure, and I know I want to ignite what's going to happen here by inducing a couple key users to come here. So that's the second. It's a minority piece. The majority is public infrastructure, but that is important. I'll give a little more detail when I get to the sources and uses about inducing key users with the incentives. Okay, that was the goal, right? That was the goal. That the how with the commercial and the incentives is three pieces, and that's on your screen underneath commercial. The first is tax increment financing. That has two, is a CID. As you've seen many a times, this takes up to a 1% additional sales tax that doesn't exist today, employs it just over the project, the commercial part of the project, and then uses those funds to help, again, pay for public infrastructure. And then third is the city shared sales tax. Now I want to slow down and make sure we understand this. This is taking 1% of the uncaptured half, right? So half of the city sales tax is 1.375%. This takes 1% of that, specifically 0.5% from the general, 0.25% from the transportation, and 0.25% from capital improvement. Now I want to pause here. This is going to be, this isn't my first time having the privilege of being before you, presenting a project, talking about these sort of topics. This third piece of sharing some of the city sales tax is more unusual, but I will contend, and I look forward to questions about it, it's absolutely necessary. It's 15 to 20% of the overall incentives to help with this public infrastructure, and it will only be used for the public infrastructure. That's it, no inducement of tenants or anything like that, only for the public infrastructure. And the reason I paused and kind of got boring there on how do you break down what part of the sales tax levy is going there, those are and staff can speak to this and you know this, but in general, those are the levies that would otherwise help if you decided to spend money on arterial streets and things like that. These are the very levies that were, in general, designed for these sort of public improvement costs. So we try to tailor it that way so it's not some sort of distortion, right, of, well, that wasn't why we passed that sales tax. That's not what it's for. So again, that's 1% of the 1.375% that would help with the project. Now, everything I just said before I move to residential is only applying those three incentives we just talked about to the commercial components of the project, which if you had your map in front of you would be 2, 4, and 6. Okay, the other half of the coin is on the same screen, which is the residential. So the residential incentives have a different goal. We gave a goal, right, for the commercial. The goal for the residential is, one, you've heard it a million times, and you'll probably hear it a million times again until it's not a problem, predictable taxes. The other is to induce a mix of great residential that this council wants to attract to the city. How? That was the goal. How does it work? What's proposed is Chapter 100, the same tool this body has chosen to use a number of times before for select multifamily residential. And there's two types of multifamily residential that's been programmed for this overall development. The first is, I'll call it more the traditional high-end Class A, multi-story, right, that we've done several of these projects before. And what would be proposed is an $1,800 pilot, payment in lieu of tax per year for 10 years with a biennial increase of 3%. If you've heard that before, that's because that's been the practice here in the last, I need to adjust my dates. We're going on, about a year since we started that with those projects. The other piece is TriStar with that 55+ product, and it's not a traditional, stacked multi-story. It's entirely different. And I did a full presentation on this. Again, that was the one that was approximately 6 months ago, and I'm not going to affirmatively do that. We can talk about it if you want. But the pilot there is proposed much higher. The pilot that worked for that pro forma, it's a totally different residential product, was $2,776, and that is unchanged from the conceptual when we came before you 6 months ago. Both types of multifamily residential I just mentioned would also request sales tax exemption on construction materials, as is typical, and then just one marker to say any single family that, like we talked about for possibly the back of the golf course or other location, would have no incentive whatsoever. So that's like big underscore gesticulation, no single family, would get any sort of incentives. So it's easiest to visualize everything I just spit out very quickly and put on one slide in the form of sources and uses, at least for me. Again, this is big. We're going to zoom in. This is at least in your packet. You can squint at it and ask me questions, but I want to break it down a little bit. So if we look at just that portion of the sources and uses that deals with public cost, and we go back to the theme of public cost, public infrastructure, and you look at the screen quickly, I'm just going to draw your attention to it in case there's questions that come up that we want to dig into. So you can see that the three incentive types are across the top. It says TIF, CID, and shared city sales tax. We covered what those were. If you follow your eyes down, when there's a number in that column, it's saying that some of those funds would be programmed to go to that type, that type of use. So for example, for TIF, you would see that the TIF would be helping primarily with that $12.7 million of site work infrastructure costs. That's that public infrastructure cost that spaghetti map was showing you. That's going to a portion of that. And then you would also see under TIF, you'd see $2.7 million going to help the Fieldhouse facility, the Parks facility. And then lastly, we want to be able to, and we've said this from the beginning to the Parks Board, we want to be able to make that project happen. So we'd be buying at great expense all this land, but we would contribute for free to the Parks Department, the land that their facility would go on, and that's that $1.2 million. And then you could do the same thing and look at CID, and you can look at the city shared sales tax. I mentioned this once before. I'm going to mention it one more time here because it's that important. That city shared sales tax and the three levies we talked about would exclusively and only go, as you can see in the line item infrastructure, $5.1 million. That would only go to public infrastructure, because again, at least in my mind, it's like, look, those sales taxes are there for a reason. If the city's going to choose to share them and finds this compelling, you can tell taxpayers it's still going to what they were designed to go to, which is public infrastructure. So flipping to the private version of this screen, where are any public incentives going to private cost? And you can see there's only one type of incentive, TIF, that puts anything in the private side of things. And remember how I said this is primarily, vastly about public infrastructure and making all this happen, but there's an inducement component. This is where I wanted to touch on that. So if you see under TIF, you see $5.2 million, that would be saying we want, and then we intentionally didn't program this by exactly 5.2 across exactly what uses. You see that multi-sport entertainment facility under it, you see the hotel, you see the MOB. We figured tonight, hopefully we get a green light to move forward and do all the detail that has to happen and months of work with staff. That would be the kind of thing we'd figure out, and ultimately we'd be back before you. But those uses, which if you were looking at your map or do later, that's project area 4, all those uses, that's a key one. That's right next to that field house. That's right up on 291. We think that the multi-sport is key. We have a user not able to say it right now, but they are extremely sought after. Extremely sought after. And even when you show them a site, first is they have to like your site. They have to like the demographics. They have to start there. But then they still have 10 options for every one that they're going to put in. We have to induce them. It's what I get to do for a living, right? We find ways to induce them, users, to come to our site. So I'll highlight that one. The hotel, we also feel strongly about, to get a top operator to go in conjunction with the field house. And we think the MOB, getting top MOB in this area to get daytime high salaries, more people coming for things other than just entertainment, we think that's really important. So that's where money would go on the private side, and exclusively where money would go on the private side. Getting near the end, public-private ratios, we always end this way when we present to you anything that has to do with public incentives, because this is one of the ways you judge whether it's worth it. And so what you can see on the screen is that of all of the public incentives that would be requested from the three types of incentives, 82% of the incentives would be used on public cost. 18% would be on private, and we just covered the universe of where the private would go, trying to get those top users in that phase 4. Also, I wanted to note that every number you've seen in the uses column, like what you're seeing highlighted next to the yellow there, are in net bond issuance amounts. This is a little bit in the weeds, but I'm going to touch on it. It's because we think there are great efficiencies that could happen, and I should call them financing synergies and efficiencies, because Parks is going to bond. That's just what you do when they do the field house, and we're going to have things ready to move forward, a ton of infrastructure. So this is certainly not something we decide tonight, but I want to put a marker down. It's something staff will ultimately, if we get to move forward, will advise you on, and you will make the decision. But we think there should be could be some amazing synergies to make the financing happen all at once. Again, have a lot of experience doing this. So we put these in net bond numbers, and that's why. Last number that every single project I've ever had the privilege of being a part of, we always do this number, which is if you take the incentives against the overall capital investment, what percentage does the incentive constitute? Here at 7%, there's a little caret in the bottom that says excluding Chapter 100. That's certainly not to be sneaky. That's why we're calling it out. That's just I got to be honest, David Bushek is always the one that figures that out. So in his presentation, I think he does a number that's not 7, but I think it adds a few percentage points to take into account Chapter 100. But what's the bottom line? Even on a massive project like this with unbelievable amounts of public infrastructure, we're still at a very low incentives to overall investment ratio. In closing, there are just a few quick remaining topics I want to touch on. And one is related to the site plan. So TriStar's mixed residential project, which again is one as you're looking at the screen, has some incredible timing synergies with the field house. Remember my caveat about Parks Board still has to vote and decide they want to come here. But if you ask Mr. Snook, assuming the Parks Board comes to this site, Parks will want to go. Parks has been patient. I've watched this. I've been in meetings with Mr. Snook for over a year. There's design. There's a lot of things that have to happen, but they have to pick their site. If they pick this site, they're going to want to go. And they're going to want to know that the infrastructure that they'd be getting for free, the public infrastructure, not just the land, but the infrastructure, will exist, because that's a big fumble if they assume it, go forward on their financing, and then the public infrastructure doesn't show up. Well, the nice thing is TriStar is also assuming this gets a green light tonight, and they move forward very shortly after this with their Chapter 100 plan. They would start next year, and they would put in that infrastructure at their cost in 2024, which will put the public street access that the Fieldhouse needs in at a time when it's not speculative. When the Parks makes their decision, they would know the infrastructure is going to be there at no cost to Parks. So this is going to give them great confidence as they spend. I haven't asked Mr. Snook exactly how much, but I just guarantee you hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to design this. They'll know their free infrastructure will be there. They don't have to speculate and take any risk on that. That is a great timing synergy that the TriStar project has with Parks. Also, something on the golf course area. The golf course here, if you mind following my cursor, is right here. It bumps up right. It's the very northern part, or the hat on top of the project. So there's a chance that the golf course may decide to delay redevelopment. They definitely understand and support the eventual infrastructure that you're looking at on the screen completely. And we've been working closely hand in hand for a year or more. But they might decide to unbolt from our timing for a lot of reasons that I would there's a lot of reasons that they may decide to do that. And if that choice is made, we already have a contingency that we shared with staff, which is we would take, it's almost the exact same acreage for the multifamily components in here, 8 and 5, to fit in here. And we do have, through our partner TriStar, have a contractual control of that ground as well. So again, I try not to belabor any one point, but I'm introducing concepts for you, that's quite possible as we move forward with Mr. Bushek and staff, Mr. Elam and everyone, that could happen, but it's also quite possible they could choose that they are on our timeline and it could look exactly like it looks on the screen. So that's more of a disclosure than anything. And then truly lastly, what's the value proposition? I try to end with this every time because I kind of think the rest of it is all foundation to the ultimate question for an elected official as to where is the value compared to the cost, right? Is this worth it for my constituents? And here's what my humble opinion about that. There's a massive amount of land in the northeast quadrant of these two highways, which is the area we're talking about. And it's doing almost nothing. We love the golf course, but save that. It's doing almost nothing for the city. It's not doing anything for the taxing jurisdictions. And it's really doing nothing for residents. The public infrastructure hurdles are immense as we've gone through. And it has prevented other people from coming in and bringing to highest and best use for the city all this land. So by creating an incentive structure that is primarily about overcoming the public infrastructure obstacles and secondarily about inducing some key tenants, that is how we can facilitate a master development that would otherwise not happen. We always say but for, right? But I mean, literally cannot happen without some Herculean effort like this to put all the pieces together. This will also provide a home for the Parks Department's field house, if they so choose. Is this the only place that the field house could be located? Again, I don't want to be misquoted or an article or something that says, Mr. Peterson said the field, this is really where it has to go. Absolutely not. Mr. Snook has said that the board, and it's private, it's not something shared with us, that there could be some other locations. But is this the part of the city that the board has publicly shared the field house should go? We have heard that clearly. This part of the city, that's where it goes. And there are not many situations, in my opinion, where the Parks Board is going to be able to find free land, free public infrastructure on its timeline when the Parks Board wants to move forward, and where there's going to be new rooftop developments all around it, and supporting synergistic new modern buildings and uses from hotels, restaurants, entertainment, etc. Meanwhile, setting aside the benefits of, additional housing options, which has huge benefit in and of itself, setting aside more options for entertainment, more options for retail, this provides economic benefits to Lee Summit. It provides more jobs. Everything in these commercial areas, 2, 4, and 6, creates jobs that aren't here today, large numbers of jobs. It creates residents, right? When we build new types of housing like that 55 plus and even more multifamily in this location of town, it creates more residents. It does. Some people move within Lee Summit, but it brings more people to Lee Summit who spend more money, who generate more taxes, who cause more businesses to come, which causes more jobs to be here. There's also significant tax revenue from the multifamily pilots, not just after 10 years, right? But look at those numbers, right? The $1,800, we've shown those before. Mr. Bushel, it's a lot of money, let alone the approximately $2,800 that would be generated by the TriStar project per year, per unit for 10 years. City sales tax revenues from the non-shared portion of the city sales tax will immediately start to generate when there's commercial built here. Also excise tax, right, on a massive amount of development. That accrues to the city's bottom line. And all of these taxes together are millions of dollars, even though there's incentives happening, millions of dollars that would flow to the city. And overall, it would just be another example of, and I have said this privately, people have heard me say this, it's not for a speech from the podium. It would be another example of Lee Summit soaring ahead and being ahead of the pack. Leading with developments like this is something that you're not seeing across the metro right now. You're not. Not right now. Not developments that are this challenging. And this tells the metro, by doing something challenging, at least green lighting staff to work with these developers, it's saying we're open for business and we're rolling out the mat. We are ready for more people to move to Lee Summit and experience what Lee Summit has to offer. So we thank you for your time tonight, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. We look forward to answering your questions this evening, and in the hopes that we receive feedback to get a green light to move forward to spend what will be hundreds of thousands of dollars to try to move this whole vision forward through approvals and plans and permits and all of that. So thank you for the opportunities to be before you. Love to answer your questions when you say it's appropriate.
Yeah, thank you. We'll wait for Mr. Bushek's presentation.
All right, I will start out with talking a little bit about the scope and the complexity of this project and the size of the project. While going through the presentation that I had prepared that's in your meeting packet, one thing that occurred to me is we didn't have anything in the packet that really showed you the scope of this project, the size of this project, and how it compared to some other projects. So I'll start with an apology. This is a new slide that was not in your packet. I prepared it today, but I thought this might be helpful for you to understand the size of the project that we're looking at here. I just included the acreages of each of these parcels, and by the land mass, including part of the property that's not in the city, which I'll talk about in a moment, it's about 270 acres. As a point of comparison, Summit Fairs, 53 acres. Streets of West Pryor, 73 acres. Summit Woods, 99 acres. Paragon Star Project, 96 acres. The Summit Tech Campus, 135 acres. And the single largest projects that we've seen in Lee Summit to date, the Discovery Park project, that's 200 acres. So in terms of land mass, this is probably the single largest project that the city has seen. And in terms of the total investment, it's probably second only to Discovery Park. So this is a very significant project that we're reviewing here. I thought it'd be important to start with the scope and the land mass that we're looking at. When I first took a look at what Mr. Peterson called the spaghetti map, when they introduced this to us back in October, it was a little daunting. There's a lot of information, as he said, on this. And when I started preparing for this presentation 3 or so weeks ago, I revisited that issue, and so I thought what might be helpful is for me to break this down into some more bite-sized pieces for you to talk through the land masses and the different incentives and how they look on the map, and walk through those with you. So what I've done is, I've cropped the developer site plan on the left, and on the right, we start with the basic map. This is the entire project area. The first thing I'll note is that a portion of the parcels that they would be acquiring here is actually outside the city. So my map stops at the city's border. To be determined in the future whether this might be annexed into the city or what happens with this property if this does or does not become part of the development. So that's an issue that we'll visit in the future. And so if you go back to the previous map, I said this is 270 acres. You can probably shave about 25 acres off the side, so maybe it's more like 250 or so, but still a very large project. But my maps here focus just on what's in the city's boundaries. Then the next map, now we start to compare these land masses to the project. This first shape, with the notation down here, this is the TIF area. So Mr. Peterson explained that these are the commercial components in their various phases. That's what this shape looks like. So the TIF area, and actually also the CID area, could be included here. The TIF and the CID is this landmass down here, which includes all the commercial. Then moving from south to north, the next landmass, approximately a triangular shape, that's where the field house and fitness center would be located. And then moving north, this is the TriStar piece, the townhomes, which is their phase 1, which is what would be constructed first. And their phase numbering is roughly the actual construction phasing. So TriStar would be first component of commercial down here would be second, and the field house would be third, but those would probably happen all roughly simultaneously, including the initial spine of the roads and the road network that Mr. Peterson explained to serve this area. So the development would essentially start in the south area and work its way north. The next landmass, these are the two multifamily components, which is their phase 5, and then eventually their phase 8. And then finally, the single family component up here, and as Mr. Peterson indicated, there's no incentive requested for this area. That would just be straight single family development if and when it happens. One other thing that I will mention on this map here, I did a evaluation, what's the distance between this interchange and what is planned to be the Hook Road interchange. That distance is about 6,020 feet, so that's over a mile. So to give you a sense of this distance here, this is over a mile. And this land where the Hook Road interchange would be located, MoDOT's already acquired that property. So that land is already in MoDOT ownership for that interchange if and when it happens. So this chart then analyzes the different incentives by their phasing. And this is where the analysis gets a little more complex. And I'll say this about this chart, and then the next chart that I'll show you. Some of the presentations that you've heard in the past have been, for example, a single multifamily development with its incentive request. That might be one of these many lines here. And you've had 60 to 90 minutes of discussion on any one of those. So I'm really abbreviating my discussion here. I'm condensing all of this down into 2 simple charts in the hopes that you can process this and understand it. There's a lot of numbers and data behind what I'm presenting to you in a very summarized fashion. So if you have specific questions, we can go through those. But my goal is for you just to have a basic understanding of the incentives so we can get to your discussion and questions. First phase, that's the TriStar development. They would use the Chapter 100 incentive, sales tax exemption on construction materials, and the fixed pilot schedule at $2,776 per unit for a total of 226 units. The retail phases then, so 2, 4, and 6, those would be the TIF areas, each one of those being presumably a distinct project area for TIF activation purposes. That would include the city sales tax contribution, which Mr. Peterson described, and then the CID sales tax would also occur in those areas. So the TIF, the city sales tax contribution, and the CID would occur in those commercial phases 2, 4, and 6, which are the southernmost end of the map that I showed you. I noted here the city sales tax exemption would apply to the field house. That's not really an incentive that's being requested by the developer, just something that I noted would occur because it's a city project and all of the construction materials would be purchased on a tax exempt basis as a point of comparison to the developer's request for the same with respect to the use of the Chapter 100 structure. And for the 2 multifamily phases, which are phase 5 and phase 8, this is where they're requesting the Chapter 100 sales tax exemption on construction materials and the fixed pilot schedule for the multifamily at $1,800 per unit for up to a total of 600 units between those 2 phases. And that $1,800 per door is the highest that any project has been approved in the past for the North Point Phase 3 apartments and for the Cityscape apartments just south of the police station. So that $1,800 per unit matches the highest that you've approved for previous projects. So that is how the various incentives, the TIF, sales tax contribution, CID, and the Chapter 100 works amongst those various phases. This is a condensed sources and uses summary. So Mr. Peterson showed you his full budget with all the phases. I tried to condense it down even more for you. So we're focusing on the major costs associated with any project: land acquisition, building costs, site work and infrastructure, hard costs, soft costs. This is the total budget as he described to you. This is the incentive column, and again, this is just summarize how the incentives would be used. And the one thing that I'll note with this budget to match up with his is this is just the reimbursable portion of the budget. There's a cost savings portion that I'll get to in just a moment. So the reimbursable portion of the budget, that's reimbursement from the TIF revenues, the city's shared sales tax, and the CID revenues, that's about 7.1% of the total project cost, to put that in comparison to other projects that you've approved in the past. The remainder of the parks budget for the field house, $22.3 million, would come from mostly debt financing, is my understanding, and there may be some cash contribution from the Parks Department for that cost, but that would mostly be a financing. And then that leaves the remainder of the cost to be covered from the private side, and that's about 88% of the total project costs. This then, and this is where I get to my summary, this is the final slide with lots of other detail behind this if we want to dig deeper into the numbers. This is equivalent to the slide that you've seen many times for other projects. So this breaks down the phases by grouping using the different sources of incentives. So for that commercial development, phases 2, 4, and 6 on the south, using TIF, this is the number. So summarizing the numbers you've already seen, that's 5.2% of the total project costs. And then the city's shared sales tax component, which has been called super TIF in some cases, a request for the city to contribute the additional 1% of the city's sales taxes that are not captured by the TIF plan. That would be about $5.2 million in reimbursement, which is 1.2% of the project costs for public improvements. The extra sales tax on the commercial, less than 1% of the total project costs, about 0.6. And then we get to the residential components. So the Chapter 100, the sales tax exemption on construction materials, would apply at their request to the three commercial phases and to the multifamily phases, 1, 5, and 8. This is where we get into a calculation that was not included in the previous presentation. And so again, this is one of those numbers where I'm summarizing it down for you. There's a summary sheet behind this, and then there's a lot of calculations behind that summary sheet. But condensing it down, my calculation based on all the factors that we've talked about for previous projects, the benefit of this fixed pilot structure for all of the multifamily, I'm sorry, this is the sales tax exemption. The benefit of the sales tax exemption as requested by the developer is $6.7 million, and that's 1.6% of the total project costs. And then the fixed pilot component for the multifamily, that's about a $6 million benefit, which is 1.4% of the total project costs. So by my calculation, including the benefit of the Chapter 100, which was not included in the previous presentation, total benefit to the developer using all of these incentive tools is about $42.4 million, which is a little over 10% of the total project costs. I previously showed you, and I don't have this in my presentation, but I've shown you this large table before, which itemizes every incentive project that the city has ever approved, all TIF, all CID, all Chapter 100, and so forth. Point of comparison, the average for TIF historically approved by the City Council going back to the year 2000 is about 18%. The historic average for community improvement districts is about 13%. And the historic average for Chapter 100, all the benefits those have provided in their various uses, is about 9.2% across various projects. So the request here, as a comparison to the total project cost, it is at the lower end of what the City Council has approved in the past. I know you'd like to hear about that to compare to what the City Council has done in the past. Last few comments that I have. If this moves forward, we will be engaging our financial advisor, Columbia Capital, to conduct the but-for analysis and the financial feasibility analysis that's necessary for the TIF plan to proceed. And we'd also include all of these other incentives in that analysis, so we would ask them to do a full analysis. Schedule, this would have to go through the TIF Commission. There's a long lead time for the TIF Commission after documents are prepared. So we would be, if everything proceeds forward with positive feedback tonight, and accounting for all the notices and document preparation, we'd probably be looking at a TIF Commission hearing in probably March of next year, and then it would go to the City Council sometime after that, and that's where we'd have to navigate election season. Would this come to the council before or after the election? Something we'll have to think about at a later date if you provide positive feedback tonight. One question that I'll go ahead and address here, I think it's likely that you might ask, have we ever used Super TIF before? Have we ever had a city sales tax contribution? The answer is yes, slightly. For Streets of West Pryor and Discovery Park, the city agreed to contribute part of its sales tax revenues from just the hotel. So we've never had a shared sales tax to the extent that it's being requested tonight. It has been requested in the past, but has never been approved by the City Council. So this is a larger request for shared sales tax than we've seen, but we do have a small example of it for hotels in Streets of West Pryor and Discovery Park. The last thought, focusing on the red language here in the purpose column, because this is what I'd like to help you focus on, the purpose of each of these incentives. The purpose of the TIF and the CID is to provide reimbursement. So that actually generates dollars from the project back to the developer to provide a reimbursement stream to the developer in ultimately these amounts. The purpose of the Chapter 100 is primarily to reduce development costs. It has the secondary but very important benefit that they've indicated of predictability on a per unit basis for these residential units, but it's primarily to reduce costs. So if you were to boil down all of the incentives, the first three incentives provide a revenue stream to reimburse for public improvements and that tenant inducement that Mr. Peterson discussed, and then these two are to reduce costs, and those are ultimately the purposes of the incentives that are being requested. That concludes my initial remarks. Like I said, I have many other slides here depending on where your discussion goes and what kind of questions you have.
Great, thank you. We do have some questions I know people will line up for here real quick. So we'll go ahead and start off with Councilmember Pryor.
Thank you. Okay, so I like a lot of what I heard tonight, but I'm trying to refresh my memory a little bit. The TriStar, is that we approved that, but then they came back before us for a presentation of an incentive request, and that we weren't crazy about, correct?
Yeah, so the zoning's been approved, then they came back with the incentive request in May of this year, and the request was for a fixed pilot equal to the amount that's being discussed tonight. But the additional function that they included at that point, which is not being requested tonight, was a sharing of that pilot stream. And if I remember right, that pilot stream of $2,776 per door, 65% of that would flow to the taxing districts as normal, and 35% of that would essentially be captured and flow back to the developer to reimburse them for public improvement costs. That component of the TriStar project has been eliminated from the request tonight, and in its place, you have what I've discussed here. So the public improvement reimbursement, in this case, would come from the TIF, the sales tax sharing, and the CID, as opposed to some of the pilots flowing back to that particular developer.
Okay, thank you. And then just another quick question I had. It didn't necessarily give us numbers on how much multifamily, how many single family you guys are kind of talking about. Do you have those numbers right now, or?
Councilwoman, the answer is yes, of course, but the question is getting the right piece of paper. So, Councilwoman, what I'm going to do is, since I know there'll be other questions, when I'm not being asked a question, it's on my computer. I'll give you those numbers in a minute.
Okay, thank you very much.
Bet.
Is that it for now?
That's it for now, yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Shields.
Thank you. So I don't know if this would be a question for Mr. Bushek or for the developer. The super TIF is basically a 1% of the sales tax, adds up to 1% sales tax, and the CID is also 1% sales tax. Why do those generate such different amounts there?
I'm sorry, you were comparing that with what other number?
So the super TIF, it's 1% total in sales tax, right? And the CID is a 1% sales tax, but the super TIF is supposed to generate 5 million and the CID generates like 2.6. So why, is it just that they have different caps, or do you anticipate those generating different amounts of revenue for some reason, or what happened there?
Numbers prepared?
No, it's one total.
The best I can tell you at the moment is I would have to take a look at the developer's numbers to answer that question.
But like, would those be capturing the same point of sale? Like does the CID cover, or does the super TIF cover sales that the CID doesn't capture, or are they over the same area? Like, I just wanted to understand what's going on there.
Oh, I think I have the answer. Got it. I think I've got it. So the operation of the TIF captures 50% of all sales taxes. So the TIF will capture half of the CID sales tax. So this number here is only 50% of the 1%. The other 50% is up in this number because it becomes TIF revenues. And then this is the full 1%. So if you double this, it should be this or very close.
Okay, so it's, so that's like that's the net value, because half of it's getting pulled up here, okay.
Right, so.
Okay.
And to be clear, so you understand all of the sales tax pieces, actually, here, I have a chart for that. So this is how the sales tax, here's how the sales taxes work. And this might help you understand a little bit better. So here's the scenario. The project is built just as has been presented, all the incentives have been approved, just as being requested. And these are the sales taxes that would be imposed at a cash register in the retail area when everything is open. You've got the city sales taxes, the county sales taxes, the zoo district, and the CID. And then the TIF will capture none of the state sales tax, 50%, the default is 50% of the city sales tax, 50% of all but one of the county sales tax does not capture the stadium sales tax, and then 50% of the zoo district and CID. So the number. Yeah, right, we got one other, yes. And so the answer to your first question, the TIF captures half of the CID sales tax, the other half is that number, that 2.6 million that you asked about. And then here's the percentage that's captured, and here's their additional contribution request from the city sales tax. So hopefully this chart answers your question.
Yeah, it's helpful, it is, yeah. And then I guess.
Sorry, one other component that Mr. Peterson just reminded me, TIF does not capture sales tax on hotel rooms, but the CID sales tax will apply to hotel rooms. Little difference in the numbers. That might explain a little more of the difference.
Sure. And then my other question is, did we consider anything like a TDD instead of doing this city sales tax sharing? Like, are there other ways that wouldn't necessarily eat directly into city revenues to accomplish this? I feel like we've kind of had this discussion kind of recently on another project and tried to push a little bit away from starting to expand that capture of the city sales tax.
That's certainly an option.
On every project.
So a point of comparison, I suppose, would be the Streets of West Pryor project. That project does use a CID and a TDD. They're not an exact match, but the TDD does not apply to the grocery store, but everything else. So that is something that could be considered, and if that's the kind of feedback you'd like to provide tonight, I'm sure the developer would like to hear that. And if you do encourage them to use a TDD, that would likely replace some or most of the request for the city sales tax sharing component.
And would that be an appropriate tool in this case, since it looks like a lot of the expenses are transportation related, new streets and that kind of thing?
Yes, I think there'd be plenty of capacity to use those revenues if that's the direction the project goes.
Kind of similar to comments I made before, that would be my inclination to try to, again, avoid expanding that use of the city sales tax sharing, kind of stick to tools that we've used before and not eat into our revenues as much. I think those are all of my questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Edson.
Yeah, just to follow up with Councilmember Shields, I think looking into that TDD would be preferable for me also. David, you went through the slides and I missed the one I want to talk about. There was one regarding the field house, and well, the field house was on it, but it was incentives. Okay, so explain to me the 2.7 for the field house.
So I think the answer is this. I'll go ahead and say it, and then people can come up and fill in blanks or correct me if I'm wrong. I believe this is the amount that the Parks Department is budgeting for the field house based on their financial situation and
The
revenues.
22.
Yes, 22.3. And I think this is the developer's contribution to enhance the field house.
Okay,
And I'm going to turn around and look to see if. That's close. So I think my answer's mostly right.
Okay, well, I was just trying to figure out if we were somehow incentivizing a public building. That's with the, some of the other things, and that's what I wanted to know, if we can do that.
Yes, this would be an eligible use of the TIF revenues.
Okay, okay. And just for the, regarding the, this isn't for you, David, on the senior villas, the over 55 villas, so are those owner occupied or are those for rent?
No, those are for rent, yep. It's the same ones we presented before, which were rental.
Okay. Any inclination to sell them?
I don't think this exact design, TriStar does a lot of different projects, but this from the beginning was designed, I mean, they very much look at the area and the demographics and where the demand is, but we're trying to talk them into being a part of the other phases here, and there could be some for sale for sure. But this would be for rent. And I'm ready with my answer. Thanks to Mr. Lavery. So the TriStar that you've seen before is 226 units broken down between the two product types. And then these are, you're gonna be like, wow, those are very round numbers. They're never like this. Obviously, this is thoughtful conceptual planning, right? So when you hear this, those other 4 phases of multifamily, which are intended, again, we spare you all the detail. You keep hearing sheet upon sheet behind. We have, this is intended to span over a number of years. It could be 10 years of phased multifamily, but the idea was 200, 200, 200, 200. Just phase it out, absorb more rooftops, 200 more. So a total of 200 times 4, 800 over, 8 to 10 years.
Great.
Mayor Pro Tem, can I follow up with
Yes,
one more
absolutely.
question? Thank you. And if I missed it, I apologize. What's the lifespan of the CID?
Given the infrastructure involved here, we milked it for all it was worth. We went to the 27 years that is allowed by statute.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Councilmember DeMorro.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I have a question about the infrastructure, the 5.4 on the public streets, water and sewer and storm. And it occurred to me that this isn't actually broken out, and dissecting what stormwater abatement has to happen before this land is even developable. If you know what I'm saying, because are we incentivizing the entire stormwater abatement to make the land developable, or how is that broken out? Do you have it broken out? Do you have a list of, especially the stormwater?
And I'm going to clarify and then answer your question so I go down the right street. Are you focused on, you're saying stormwater, or are you thinking more of sanitary and the issues about all the offsites that you know about? Which one is your brain going to the most?
Well, both.
Both. Okay.
Those broken out
Yep.
that we're incentivizing to help the city rather than help the land or help the development be developable, if that makes sense.
Let me take a swing at it, and then between staff and Mr. Bushek and myself, we'll get the answer. So when I think stormwater, and then we'll do sanitary, stormwater is primarily handled here with the, in terms of the expense with the public streets. So all those red lines we saw on the spaghetti map have storm sewer systems that have to be put in that run along with curb and gutter right along public streets, as you know. And then we have to do something with that. So I don't have my presentation up, but in your mind's eye or in your packet if it's printed out, you saw a bunch of detention blue spots, right, on the spaghetti map. And those are there because we also have a policy. There's times when Jeff and others would tell us we don't want to detain, but in general, we usually hold water and let it go at the right time. So there's all that expense. There's all the expense with the public street, all that public infrastructure. And in general, there's BMPs, there's other details, but in general, that's that, largely driven by the public streets. The sanitary is totally different because the big costs there, without stealing the thunder of really big experts that we spent a lot of time with that are sitting back in that area, like a lot of places, we're kind of stuck. After TriStar, we have sanitary problems. And this is, remember how people have tried and throw in the towel? This is one of the throw in the towel moments. There's major problems. And some of the sanitary, Mr. Elam's laughing that I'm the one talking about this, but some of the sanitary is going to the east and south, and there has to be a big overflow basin that has to be constructed, and it's going to take way more than just our watershed. But we have our proposed proportionate cost handled with that, which is a big number. And then also there's some sanitary that has to go south across 150, and that's a whole nother discussion. But these are examples with stormwater and with sanitary that are big public improvement problems that deal with, like I just said, off-site problems, and all that is put into those numbers where we're saying, hey, this is what we need help with, the $22 million. That's all in there.
So the BMPs that are actually on site now, that would be out of bounds on a golf course. Those are staying. Those will be improved and stay for stormwater management.
So good, now to place you where you are, you're zooming in a good way on a stormwater question. I did the big picture. So when development is happening up on the Shamrock Golf Course, is the existing pond going to be used for retention, detention, best management practices? I will always tell you when I'm going to stop. I would speculate that, and as I've kind of heard, I think the answer is yes, but I don't know if Mr. Elam wants to speak in any detail on that or not, or leave it at the level of, most likely in some way. I don't know.
Good evening, Ryan Elam, Assistant City Manager. In regards to the sanitary and the stormwater, kind of as been mentioned, Mr. Peterson's correct. We are still at a conceptual level, albeit it's a very detailed conceptual level, but there's still a significant amount of engineering work that needs to occur to get into the details of exactly what's going to happen to each one of those ponds, as well as the exact routing of the sanitary sewer and there's been some preliminary sizing on the off-site infrastructure necessary that all needs a lot more work and in order to move forward, which is why this is still at that conceptual level. It will still go through the full review process that as we kind of get towards those details on there.
So the 5.4 million could climb, in other words, is what you're saying, with more engineering.
Yeah, it's a possibility, and I will say, though, that with this conceptual, the eligible costs could increase, but I think there's going to be a financial capacity situation to where anything kind of over would likely be the responsibility of the developer. It's going to be dependent upon what revenue the project as a whole can generate. But yeah, I think as we continue to refine that, I think there's a high likelihood that those costs will change.
Because, I feel very comfortable incentivizing for the public good, but then when we get into incentivizing to make the land developable is another question in my mind. If I think it's understood there. So, yeah, thank you, Ryan.
There's one more thing that I can add to the point that you're discussing right now. Thinking about this, again, in terms of these three components being a reimbursement source and then these two components being a cost reduction source, here's how we typically handle it. Not typically, I think this is how we've handled it every time when we had a TIF plan or a CID. By the time we get to the point where the plan is approved and then we've negotiated and finalized the contracts to implement this, the amount of TIF reimbursement and this component of reimbursement, if this stays part of the project, the CID reimbursement or TDD, if that's what's ultimately used, those are capped by contract. So to get to the issue that I think you're asking about, it's an estimated cost today, and by the time we reach the finish line of the incentives, which would be some point next year, assuming this moves forward, we'll have a contract that says your TIF reimbursement, this reimbursement, your CID, TDD reimbursement, if that's appropriate, it's capped at X plus an interest cost. And if it costs more for the developer, they have to pay the difference. So it becomes a known quantity by the time you approve these incentives, including the contracts.
So we would set the bar, in other words.
Yes.
We would set the bar of this is what we're going to cover, and anything else way and above that.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Thank you. That's a good way to explain it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. So I don't see anyone wanting to speak at this point, and before I gauge my colleagues' kind of perspective on the project, I guess I'll just make a couple quick comments or questions. Mr. Peterson, I guess I'll start with you, just to kind of clarify a couple things. So just to confirm, the TIF itself, are you looking for, the maximum legislative amount is 23 years? Is that what you're seeking for TIF?
Mayor Pro Tem, we sized it that way to come up with the cost, and then the way it would work is months from now, we'd enter into a development agreement, TIF commission, reverse order, but and there'd be some sort of cap. And so if we generate sales faster than that, it would end sooner, but the maximum would be 23 years. Yeah.
And then I think you've already answered, so the super TIF, or the CID, you're looking at max of
The statute says maximum of 27, which is
27
pretty
years.
typical for the
Okay,
request.
all right.
Yep.
So that's that. And maybe more question for our staff regarding following up on the infrastructure question. I think I know the answer, but maybe Mr. Park or Mr. Elam. So I'll wait till you get up.
We'll come down and see what you.
Perfect,
what
that's
you got.
awesome. So how, all the infrastructure, all the road improvements we're talking about, I think we all get it. The development's gonna start on the south end near 150 and go northward. So, do these road improvements fall in line with our plan and things that we have already kind of planned ahead for?
Generally, yeah, they do align with what we'd anticipate being long-range plans for roadway connections. It kind of follows a little different alignment, being that they're moving the primary function of the outer road over to the east a little bit, which I think is great for land development and maximizing its potential. But we haven't yet seen a traffic study to tell us, is this the full extent of all the improvements that are needed? A traffic study to tell us, is Hook Interchange triggered by this level of development activity or more improvements to the interchange? But in general, the concept is something that we accept and it seems reasonable. It's just we don't know if that's the full extent and scope of work that would be needed to support it. That study would come forward with a development application that you would be able to review at that time.
And then obviously, once that study gets kicked off, you'll see where it ties into the interchange up on the north side.
Yeah, so as it's been presented tonight, they're not anticipating a new interchange with the project, but again, we would not know that until a traffic impact study has been completed to see what are the operations down at 150 Highway, and MoDOT's going to have a lot to say in that regard as well, and whether or not those level of service and operations are something that you find acceptable without a new interchange at Hook to help distribute that traffic better.
Okay, along kind of the same line of questions, there's a comment made about the outer road maybe eventually being not significant or you know, not, there's better uses for navigation throughout the development phases. Is that something that's just kind of totally conceptual, removing the outer road?
It's conceptual. I don't know that they anticipate removing the road altogether, but just diminishing its function. So right now, it's anticipated to carry a lot of traffic as a frontage road. Essentially, they'll be building a backage road, and this will become more of a local distributor to the retail and residences that are more approximately close to where that outer road is. But the heavy volume would be attracted to the new arterial road.
All right, excellent. I think that's all the questions I have. I think Councilmember Felker has some questions.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So just looking at the 1,800 for the fixed pilots, and not knowing really when we're looking at phases, how soon these would be phased in, but in my mind, if we're starting, if this is phases 1 through 8 are somewhat chronological, when would phases 5 and 8 be anticipated? Because those are the ones that would focus on the use for at the 1,800 amount. Have a timeline or?
So again, detail that when you ask questions, you're going to get ready. You're going to get more detail. No,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
The 1,800. The idea would be that would start to inflate now, so you wouldn't end up with the final phase of apartments in 10 years getting an $1,800 pilot every other year. It would get that what's been proposed 3% inflator if this is making sense. So you would start at, I can't do that kind of math, but
Right, so
you do
whatever.
3% to the third, right? You know, times 1,800 and
So
6
the
or 8 years,
1,800
whatever that was.
wouldn't be, set in the future. You're
Exactly.
talking about setting it now.
Yeah,
and-
that wouldn't really make sense.
But don't we typically have those set when we begin the construction? That's where I'm remembering.
Right, so let's take an example of 8 years from now, let's say a final phase of 200 units. There'd be a Chapter 100 plan, and the Chapter 100 plan, which would come before you in a public hearing, and it would have a pilot schedule. And what I'm saying is, again, don't hold me to real math, but 8 years from now, 1,800, there's 4 odd years, right, ish, that happens before then. And 3%, if that was the biennial inflator, you would take, right, 103%, 103 to the, what, third or fourth or whatever that is, that's math again. And so 1,800 would not be the starting point for that project. It would be whatever that math times 1,800 is, something higher.
That's all the questions I have.
Okay. I'm sure you're here to get our opinion, and so I guess I'll ask all of us up here on the dais kind of more so your opinion and thumbs up, sideways thumb, thumbs down. So whoever wants to go first. Edson. I see you. Oh, no, I didn't see you. All right. Councilmember Lovell.
Thanks. So I'm not in support of what's being presented here. I think it feels like there's a lot of unknowns as to what's going on here. I've seen in the past, it feels like more cohesive representation of what is going to occur, when it's going to occur, and how it's going to occur. I don't see that here. And it's certainly completely different than the last time I saw it. Understanding the challenges and things that are that. A couple other things. I'm not a big fan. Look, I think incentives are a great tool for cities. And I think where we may have gone off track as a council or just as a city is just demanding more out of what we're getting for those. And like, whether that's quality, design, uses. I don't like the idea of using a super TIF for something like this. I think that's a box we don't really want to open unless it is just a groundbreaking, unique development that we feel enriches the lives of our community significantly. The TriStar Properties portion of it, I've got a problem with that coming before us, being approved, coming back a year later, asking for an incentive, not getting it, and now being kind of swallowed up in this to gain that. So I'm not a big fan of that. And then the other thing, and this is just maybe bad timing for their part, but I have just really gone through a lot of deep thought, and a lot of that is coming from messaging I'm getting from my constituents and me not being able to answer as to what we're building in this city and whether we are becoming a city of renters with continued multifamily development and what that does long term. And I know for a fact we've got considerable great inventory now. We've got considerable inventory under construction, and then we have some that are approved that are coming forward too. I think that there is something out there for this space. I know there are challenges with it. I'm not convinced in what's before us tonight is the best use and the best for this community, factoring all those factors in. So that's kind of where I'm standing today. Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem.
Councilmember Hodges.
Thank you. I'm going to kind of echo Councilmember Lovell. There are a lot of things that I like about this, but I've reached my point where I don't want to incentivize multifamily anymore. I know we keep saying, well, we've done this in the past, well, there has to come a point where we say enough is enough, and again, timing might be bad here, but I'm done. I feel like we're overdoing it. We've been overdoing it, and there needs to come a point where we stop. So I'm kind of at that point, and I don't like this super TIF idea, and I don't know. Something about this just doesn't sit super well with me. We keep hearing stuff like, I like it better when we get individual projects coming to us where we can say, oh, great, you're bringing this to us. We don't have this in our city. Instead of hearing, oh, we're going to bring a substantial business, and it sounds great, but we have no idea what it is, and then we end up getting another bank or another coffee shop or something that we already have. We need to start looking forward, and we want something we don't have. And when that starts coming, yes, we can incentivize things that we don't have that the community actually wants. So I'm not in favor of this as of right now, so that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Councilmember Shields.
Thank you. I'd support moving forward on this. I think I sort of respect Councilmember Lovell's comment that, you know, it's sort of ill-defined, but I feel like at the conceptual stage, we don't expect to see every single detail. If a council member doesn't support the overall vision of the project, like I can certainly understand that, but I think this area especially could use a lot. Kind of the south part of Lee Summit doesn't have as many options for shopping, for dining, for housing. So I think it'd be a really good addition down there. I really would like to see something other than the super TIF. I don't really want to see us expanding that tool. But overall, I think that this would be a good addition to the city and especially to that area. So I would support moving forward and seeing more detail. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Pryor.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm kind of torn. I like a lot of things about this. Incentivizing multifamily, that's been something for me for a while that I've not been crazy about doing. But I understand it's necessary sometimes and necessary for some of the growth we want to see in South Lee Summit. But what I'm having a hard time with on this is as Councilmember Lovell said, and as I kind of brought up before, it's just the approving, then coming before us for the incentive request for that specific multifamily, us not approving it, and then now it's tied in with all of this. And there was a reason we didn't approve it before. Overall, I think I'd be in support of at least moving forward. I may not. I don't know how I'll vote at that time, but at least moving forward and hearing more, I guess. But there are some things that do concern me. But overall, I do like it. I don't love the amount.
Range in the back half of that.
Do you have a timeline for that? Is that going to be?
That's totally market driven. We really think we're probably, the commercial starts, TriStar goes first, which is really important to the Parks project and for other reasons. The commercial comes next, and we think that follows for. And then there's one thing, I mean, this doesn't usually happen this way, but I gotta say, I mean, there's so much work that has gone into this, and I try not to I already do long presentations. I hope you respect that. I try not to talk on and on and on and on. I didn't dig in too deeply the TriStar. We did a conceptual, and staff, Mr. Bushek just touched on it briefly 6 months ago. And the feedback that we got, the reason we went and spent, again, a lot of time partnering up with TriStar, again, they spent a lot of effort to be ready to go after tonight. The main issue that was presented was we said, look, we really need predictability. We're going to offer you almost double? 18, not quite, but hugely higher than anybody's ever offered on a pilot because we need this predictability. Huge numbers, huge taxing jurisdiction payoffs in city right away. But we have major infrastructure problems, and no one ever knew it was going to cost this much. I did a whole presentation on this. And the hang-up, the only negative feedback we got from this body, you get to change your mind, by the way. Don't ever misunderstand when I'm standing here. You can change your mind. But the feedback we got was not about the $2,800 pilot with the sales tax exemption. The negative feedback we got was we don't like this idea of then taking part of that. We've used it on some commercial projects, how you take and you do we call it a public improvements assessment, if that rings a bell with our industrial. We're trying to be creative to try to deal with major public infrastructure problems. And this council, maybe almost everybody said, I'm not interested in that. So we went away, partnered up with the master developer, this is TriStar speaking, and peeled that off to come back to you just with the part that we didn't get negative feedback on. So you can never rely because we're just getting feedback to whether we should go spend time and money. That's the part they went and spent time and money and came back with master developer. I didn't explain this very well because, again, there's a bunch of different trails I can go down and I try not to do rabbit trails, but it's unbelievably important because without that, the same reason TriStar waited, they're a major national company that people seek them to do developments. They paused. They couldn't go. It doesn't make financial sense. With this in place and doing this partnership, they can make it happen, go fast, get started next year, get the infrastructure for parks in for free. That's the whole storyline there. I just didn't want it to be misconstrued because of my clipped sort of presentation on that point. Thank you for the opportunity to explain that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, overall, I would be in support of at least hearing a more, I don't know, I honestly feel like I was confused on a lot of this when it was being presented. So I would be in favor of hearing more and moving forward. Thank you.
Councilmember DeMoro.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I listened very intently, took a lot of notes, flipped back and forth with the presentations, and there's just a lot of unknowns. I still have a lot of questions, and you know, the information is to me receiving is inconclusive, and there's so many specific details that I still don't know. I do believe that there's a point where we have reached the saturation level, possibly with multifamily, and so that's a large number of multifamily in this project. But what struck me was we are actually in uncharted territory with the super TIF. And I'm not in favor of a super TIF, nor the term is a little bit more for me to digest also, the term on the incentives. So I too would you know, favor more information, maybe sharpening pencil, but right now there's not enough for me to give a thumbs up. Thank you.
So, just to clarify, you're okay with they come back with more information, more details?
Well, and I'm not for the super TIF. I think the amount of multifamily is a huge number that we, and again, we don't know the saturation level. We have 2 or 3 projects right now starting that are going to probably exceed that, and I'm not in favor of this presentation, this project right now, because of the uncharted territories and the unknowns.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I've got you down. Councilmember Felker. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Edson. So sorry.
No, I'm in favor of the project. I'd like to see the super TIF being taken out and maybe changing that to a TDD or something. Obviously, the Park Field House cannot go down here. It needs to go on the north side of town. I think we need to take that out of this project. I don't know who was thinking it ought to go down here.
Second. Oh,
But the over 55, I'll just make a note. I get more questions from constituents wanting to buy over 55 housing. And I have questions all the time going, all you're doing is over 55 apartments and rentals, and we would like to buy over 55 housing. So I just thought I'd throw that out there for you. All right, thank you.
thank you. All right, now Councilmember Felker.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and I appreciate all the effort and presentations today, both by staff and the applicants. So I would say I'm kind of fall in the middle where my fellow council members have spoken today. I don't know that I'm 100% on board with the presentation as a whole. Certainly like the idea of the field house and some of the commercial development that could arise around there. I come back to this question, and I know I've been asking in prior meetings recently about our understanding of our housing allocation and just feeling like, yes, where are we at? The last time we spoke here, just between council and staff, we said that at the end of 2022, our multifamily was 26%. And this number may not be completely accurate. I understand that that's a data point that's being determined, and perhaps we're going to get a better number by the end of the year. But that puts me in a position where, yes, I mean, if there's a question constituents give us, it's often about the building of apartment housing and what does that do? What does that do to our community? I'm not opposed to all multifamily. We need to have it, and there are going to be reasons to build more multifamily in the future, but we do have a lot, and I think perhaps, and maybe this is a kind of a dialogue with staff, like just as a council member, wanting to feel comfortable with more coming, like, and getting a sense of, okay, if this is what we have coming, where are we at right now? Does it make sense to continue to provide incentives for multifamily housing when we have so much in the pipeline? I know we've gone through housing studies, and we talk about where the demand lies and how sometimes building more creates more demand, and I'm not sure that I always agree with that approach and how it results, what the results are. But so I have skepticism on the multifamily housing part. I've certainly been asking lately about the structure of them, wondering if our $1,800 number is the right number to start with. And the escalator, I just feel like we are as a city not negotiating for the right percentage. I don't know what it is. I don't think 3% is the right number. I think real estate values don't increase at a 3% rate every 2 years. Certainly, I don't know exactly what they increase at, but I would be very happy to see numbers that help me formulate what that is so that we could have a better, frankly, better negotiation with those who are developing. Because if we're already incentivizing it from the start, I certainly don't want us to continue to get behind. I acknowledge that, yes, if these were in place, this would result in increased revenue immediately, perhaps at a rate that I might think could be higher. But I also realize that once we decide to go forward with this, we've made the commitment. This parcel now, and I say parcel, there's several, stands ready for development. And so, and clearly there's lots of work that has to be done. So I'm a little hesitant I'm hesitant to give that full support that I know would be appreciated by the applicants. I'll also come back to this concept the Councilmember Lovell talked about, and maybe this is just me thinking about this as we think about what vision do we give those wanting to develop in Lee Summit. So we provide the comprehensive plan. We've done a lot of that work. I'll also confess that work was done, at least from my vantage point, when I was brand new. And I will say that there are many, many things I continue to learn. And I think I'm probably not unlike a lot of citizens throughout the city of Lee Summit who perhaps watches a meeting and doesn't know half of what's being talked about. And sometimes they ask me and I try to explain. And so I guess I'm saying that to say, should we revisit this idea of what vision are we giving developers? Yes, the comprehensive plan is in place. Could we look at it again and determine, are there ways to influence that plan in a way that might, again, partly to Councilmember Lovell's point, and something he's echoed in a couple other settings, is elevating what it is we're looking for. And so my concern is, okay, does this fit that when this great area where, yes, this is an area, as Councilmember Shields says, needs something, and citizens ask. I was just asked 2 days ago, church, get me, like I can control this, but get me this, that, or the other for some citizens who live that part of town. I said, thanks for letting me know. I'll try. We'll see. I know it doesn't work that way, but I think this is part of our way of saying, okay, where are we going? Do we want all that this entails? I think there's a lot that's really good about it. Concerned about the multifamily. I'm not in support of the incentives as they would be structured presently. And I'm just saying, is there a pause button where we can kind of look at our bigger picture, what vision we are giving, what vision are we giving developers, and does this fit that? So that's my long answer. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. I know you're keeping tabs, you're doing your own tallying, but just a couple additional points, not to be redundant. I mean, I think all of these perspectives are spot on. You and your clients see that there's a concern. There's a concern in our community, maybe really has nothing to do with you and your clients. It's just where there's a concern with multifamily. There's just unknowns that we need to do some homework on, us with the city and council and mayor and staff, to figure out what that right number is. I agree with Councilmember Felker. There is an appropriate time for good quality multifamily in different segments of the city. And Anyway, so I think you're hearing that for sure from all of us, but and that's pretty consistent. On the flip side, I mean, on the positive side, you know, I appreciate the presentation. The master development approach, I think, is very unique and is a good approach. I think the spaghetti map, I think, can be a little confusing and make people hungry probably. But the field house, I mean, I think that's something that's very important to all of us up here. I think we all know that's how important that is for our entire community. And I know Mr. Snook and his team and the board are very aggressively trying to figure that out. So there's a lot of positives. I think the phased-in approach is very important, and I think potentially this could work. I think you're hearing a very, very resounding, consistent position on the super TIF. I don't think that's going to work. I know there's some other alternative suggestions made or comments made. I think we need to look at that maybe. I think it just is not consistent with our economic development policies. And Mr. Peterson, you've been around this community for a few years now, and you kind of get a taste of what is of interest to us. We want to be consistent, and so whether you go back with to your clients and work with staff and consider a TDD and see kind of how that works and impacts your project. I'm with everyone else. I mean, I guess I'll go ahead and give you, you've got 2 no's for sure from the dais up here. The mayor's not here. He would probably abstain anyway. You've got, there's 2 people that are middle of the road, 2 council colleagues that are middle of the road. There's a lot of unknowns related to infrastructure. The sewer and water situation is something that needs to be really fine-tuned. I think that was made very clear. You've got, for sure, 2 yeses. And I'm kind of in the middle myself. I want to support this. I think that part of our city, I think desperately needs these kind of services and type of amenities and resources. I think this area definitely needs this kind of product. But I think we just need to clarify some of these infrastructure and kind of unknowns that we just need to figure out before you were to bring something back for your clients and seek any kind of support from us. I think that's pretty much it. So you've got, again, 2 no's, 2 yeses, 2 middle of the roads. I'm kind of somewhere there in the middle of the road myself. I think this is something that would be great for our community. Did I do my math right? 3 no's. 3 no's. Oh, I put her in the middle of the road category. But you're not getting full unanimous support. I think that's kind of consistent up here tonight. We just need to kind of flesh some things out. And I think we all believe something needs to happen in that area, but not exactly what was presented in this way. So I hope that's helpful. I don't know if it is or not, but any other comments? So, okay, Councilmember Lovell, Councilmember Hodges, no, 2 no's for sure. Councilmember Shields, yes. Well, tomorrow was middle of the road. Councilmember Falker, middle of the road. Or were you a no for sure? You didn't say no. If you're a no, you're a no. I mean, I'll count whatever. Okay, so that's 3 no's. That's 3 no's. Councilmember Shields, Councilmember Edson, Councilmember Pryor, yes?
In the middle of the road. Yeah.
So you've got 1 yes, and the majority, the rest of us, 2 yeses, and the rest of us are middle of the road. So that's not kind of the answer you wanted, but unfortunately or fortunately, that's where we're at tonight. So I don't know if you have any other comments or questions as you depart, but kind of the way it's turned out. And I think there's things that we need to address as a council along with staff, again, on some more fundamental type issues within our community. And it's one of those, it's not you, it's us, kind of a phrase. But in all seriousness, I mean, I think it's something that we're just struggling with. The whole multi-family is something that we've been discussing all year. And yeah, we've been supportive on many of these projects that have come before us. And we're looking at the quality, you know, and the credibility of developers, of investors, all that's important. And nobody's questioning that in this case. It's just these concepts and multifamily, as Councilmember Edson said, you know, the 55 and over, I think that's a need, that's something that's needed badly in our community. But I think she's right. I think a lot of people are saying we need more either for rental or for home or for ownership, 55 and older. So just things to think about, I guess. Hopefully as a takeaway for you all. Oh, we do have a comment from Councilmember Pryor.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that and it probably goes without saying, but I'd be more of a yes without such a huge amount of multifamily. I just don't want to see that area overran with multifamily, and maybe without the super TIF. So that's why I'm more of the middle of the road, is my hesitant is the huge amount of multifamily. So thank you.
Thank you. That's what we have. So appreciate you guys coming out. Thank you. I say we need like a 10-minute break. Is that all right? All right. Thank you. We will recess for 10 minutes. Thank you all. All right, we're going to go ahead and continue with the council meeting. And that takes us to proposed ordinances forwarded from committee. 6A, council member, okay. Councilmember Shields, will you please read bill number 23-239?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I move for second reading of Bill Number 23-239, an ordinance authorizing expedited vehicle purchase of a 2023 Ford T350 custom interior command post vehicle from Vandoit in the amount of $208,000 and authorizing the city manager to execute all related necessary documents for the same.
Great. All right, we have a motion from Councilmember Shields and a second from Councilmember Hodges for a second reading of Bill Number 23-239. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please cast the vote. Cast your vote. Please record the vote. That moves to second reading unanimously. Thank you. Councilmember Shields.
Thank you. I now move for adoption of Bill Number 23-239, an ordinance authorizing the expedited vehicle purchase of a 2023 Ford T350 custom interior command post vehicle from Vandoit in the amount of $208,000 and authorizing the city manager to execute all related necessary documents for the same.
Thank you. We have a motion from Councilmember Shields and a second from Councilmember DeMorro to adopt Bill Number 23-239. Any discussion? Seeing none, please cast your vote. Please record the vote. Bill 23-239 is adopted unanimously. Thank you. Okay. Councilmember Hodges, will you please read Bill Number 23-240?
I move to second reading Bill Number 23-240, an ordinance approving the award of RFP Number 2024-021 for the purchase of custodial services on an as-needed basis to Citywide Facility Solutions for 1-year term with up to 4 one-year renewals and authorizing the city manager to execute the same for the city.
Thank you. I have a motion from Councilmember Hodges and a second from Councilmember DeMorro for second reading of Bill Number 23-240. Any discussion? Hearing none, please cast your vote. All right, that moves to second reading unanimously. Thank you. Councilmember Hodges, please read for adoption.
I move for the adoption Bill Number 23-240, an ordinance approving the award of RFP Number 2024-021 for the purchase of custodial services on an as-needed basis to Citywide Facility Solutions for a 1-year term with up to 4 one-year renewals and authorizing the city manager to execute the same for the city.
Great. I have a motion from Councilmember Hodges and a second from Councilmember Edson to adopt Bill Number 23-240. Any discussion? Hearing none, please cast your vote. Record the vote. Bill Number 23-240 is adopted unanimously. Thank you. Item 7B, Councilmember Shields.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I move for second reading of Bill Number 23-241, an ordinance approving the purchase of cross-connection control and backflow prevention compliance software portal to SwitComply sole source to the amount of $90,500, which includes a one-time setup fee of $50,000 and an annual fee of $40,500 for the Water Utilities Department, and authorizing city manager to execute all related necessary documents for the same.
Thank you. I have a motion from Councilmember Shields and a second from Councilmember Edson for second reading of Bill Number 23-241. Any discussion? Hearing none, please cast your vote. Record the vote. That moves to second reading unanimously. Thank you, Councilmember Shields.
Thank you. I now move for adoption of Bill Number 23-241, an ordinance approving the purchase of cross-connection control and backflow prevention compliance software portal to SwitComply sole source for the amount of $90,500, which includes one-time setup fee of $50,000 and annual fee of $40,500 for the Water Utilities Department, and authorizing the city manager to execute all related necessary documents for the same.
I have a motion from Councilmember Shields and a second from Councilmember Edson to adopt Bill Number 23-241. Any discussion? Hearing none, please cast your vote. Bill Number 23-241 is adopted unanimously. Thank you. Takes us to agenda item 6D. Councilmember Lovell, will you please read Bill Number 23-242?
Mayor Pro Tem. I move to second reading Bill number 23-242, an ordinance approving Amendment number 6 to the budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024, as adopted by Ordinance number 9704, Ordinance number 9705, Ordinance number 9706, Ordinance number 9707, and Ordinance number 9708 by amending the authorized expenditures for the city.
I have a motion from Councilmember Lovell and a second from Councilmember Hodges for second reading of Bill number 23-242. Any discussion? Hearing none, please cast your vote. That moves to second reading unanimously. Thank you. Councilmember Lovell.
I move for adoption Bill number 23-242, an ordinance approving Amendment number 6 to the budget for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2024, as adopted by Ordinance number 9704, Ordinance number 9705, Ordinance number 9706, Ordinance number 9707, and Ordinance number 9708 by amending the authorized expenditures for the city.
Well done. Thank you. I have a motion from Councilmember, typo. I have a motion from Councilmember Lovell and a second from Councilmember Edson to adopt Bill number 23-242. Any discussion? Hearing none, please cast your vote. Record the vote. Bill number 23-242 is adopted unanimously. Takes us to proposed ordinances, second reading. Councilmember Pryor, will you please read Bill number 23-238 for adoption?
Thank you. I move for adoption Bill number 23-238, an ordinance approving a funding agreement between the City of Lee Summit, Missouri and 635 Holdings LLC for the Shamrock Redevelopment Project.
I have a motion from Councilmember Pryor and a second from Councilmember Edson for adoption of Bill number 23-238. Any discussion? No. Councilmember Lovell.
Do you mind just clarify what we're voting for? I know I had a question about this earlier. I just want to make sure I understand what we're approving here or not approving.
Sure. Mr. Dunning or David?
So this is a funding agreement in accordance with our economic development incentive policy. When we enter into, you just heard the conceptual, right? And we heard feedback from the council. So this is the second reading to put in place a funding mechanism by which the developer deposits money with the city. And as we incur expenses working on the project, we're reimbursed for that time, since we're spending time on a project requesting incentives. So it puts in place a tool for the city to be reimbursed for our efforts in that project. Now, whether or not the developer chooses to use the tool based on the feedback heard tonight, that is yet to be determined, but it does put in place the tool.
So, I mean, I know you don't have to tell me how to vote, but like just, if you were against what they were putting together, would we still, would this be being a good, would we still want to approve this so that it's there if they came back to do something else, or is it based off of what they presented to us tonight? Just want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing here. I don't want to cause undue harm by not approving it, but I also want to make sure it's not showing that.
I would say this, council member level, from the city's perspective, it's helpful to have this tool in place so that there's a reimbursement mechanism if the developer chooses to move forward, right? We heard tonight that there was 3 not in favor of moving forward any further with this, 2 that said like to learn more, go ahead and continue to work on it, and then so that's 5, and then there was 3 that were kind of not uncertain.
So it'd be at their risk to do it, but we've at least opened the gate for them to come back and try to do something later or whatever, I guess.
Yes. Now, and reimburse us,
yes,
right?
Gotcha.
But I think it was clear that, concerns multifamily, amount of multifamily, super TIF. I think the developer understands that general direction.
Gotcha. Great. Thank you, guys.
Mayor Pro Tem, I could add
Yes, sir.
one additional thought, sort of from a legal perspective. I've said this in the past when this type of question has come up. You have full legislative discretion to say yes or no to whatever incentive package they might bring forward. So I think in this may be the most pointed sort of question you're asking. If you vote yes for this, you're not obligated to vote yes on any incentive package. You still have full legislative discretion. And they should not interpret a yes vote on this funding agreement as a yes on the incentive request if that actually comes forward.
Other questions? All right, please cast your vote. record the vote. Bill number 23-238 is adopted unanimously. Thank you all. So that takes us to committee reports. Councilmember Edson.
Thank you. We have CEDC here tomorrow night at 5 o'clock.
Thank you. Anyone else? Public Works, you guys have been quiet.
We had a meeting yesterday afternoon.
All right. You're going to keep us busy?
Yes,
All right.
we were very busy yesterday.
All right, thank you. I know Finance Committee's been really busy, so. All right, well, council comments. Y'all, oh, we got a few of them. All right. Councilmember Lovell, leading off.
Now, a couple things. I really appreciate the discourse, and with tonight, I think there's kind of this kind of idea that there's this opportunity for us to really kind of think about where we're going, what we're doing, and I just like the discussion. I love the civility of it and the opportunity to kind of just flush out all the different ideas that we have. So it makes me feel good to be able to have that opportunity to kind of talk through stuff. And then I didn't get a chance at Council Roundtable, but I wanted to mention that there was the Lee Summit Museum congratulated 2024 Legends of Lee Summit Civic Pioneer category, Buck Langsford, Tom Lovell, my dad, Marianne and Randy Rhodes, former Mayor Randy Rhodes, Doc Powell, Geneva High, Matt Sanning, and Megan Salerno. And, just nice to see a lot of people that have had great influence over our city be recognized by the City of Lee Summit and the museum, and adding to their legacy. Thanks.
Great people. Thank you. Councilmember Edson.
Thank you. In a few months, you'll have at least one new council member. But it used to be several years ago that when we swore in a new council, that during the onboarding process, we had arranged tours of city facilities for council members. Things like the water department, a parks facility, fire station, police department, airport, and even city hall. And I think we kind of got away from that during COVID. And I think there are even council members on here now who have never seen some of those facilities. So I would just like to ask staff and Mayor Pro Tem to maybe figure out a way to bring those things back, because it's a great opportunity. Not everybody gets to go to the airport, or the water building, but I think being able to see those facilities is a great learning experience. Thank you.
Can we keep her on for a little bit longer? She's got it. She is just being creative tonight. That's a great suggestion. I know I had the opportunity. Councilmember Shields, you had an opportunity. Yeah, so I think it's very, very helpful if we. Right. Yeah. So, all right. Thank you, Councilmember Pryor.
Thank you. And to Councilmember Edson's point, I haven't even seen all of City Hall. So, I don't think we've ever even been. I don't know that we've been given a tour of City Hall. So anyway, but the reason I wanted to speak is because I know the school board has been doing dinner with the board, and I just think that that's such a fantastic idea, and I didn't know if there was any way. I know that a lot of us have already done our, what are those things called that we did? Town hall, yes. I know a lot of us have already done town halls, but if we could do maybe a citywide, like, they're providing pizza. I don't know if that's something we want to do, but just open it up to where we can have people come and give their feedback. Yes, the World Cafe, yes. Just open it. They did one last night. Just open it up to where people that live in the city they feel comfortable just coming and sharing their thoughts on whatever city related that they want to share their thoughts on. And yeah, I didn't know if there was any way we could do that soon-ish.
Talking like just a open house city?
Yeah, so I don't know, I haven't been to the school boards, how they've done it, but I know that they serve dinner, and last night they did it at East Trails Middle School, I believe. But yeah, just open it up, serve dinner or not, I don't care about that part, but just open it up to where people that live in the city can come and not necessarily give a presentation like we did at our town halls, but just let people come, maybe, open house, and just ask questions and tell us their thoughts on how things are going, anything.
Maybe we should just crash the school districts.
There you go. You can do that when you're not on council anymore.
All right, you good? All right, thank you. And then before Mr. Dunning, I hand it over to you, hand off to you. I just want to I use the word echo, Councilmember Lovell's comments. And I know the mayor would be proud of us because that was quite a discussion we had on that conceptual project, and conceptual, so it wasn't kind of do or die, but that kind of discussion could be very sensitive, and but once again, collectively as a body, we have different perspectives, but then we're aligned on many things, and some feel stronger than others, but we all respect each other, and that's something that's been very important with this body for a long time, and we will lose a couple council members, but it's something we should be proud of. And I know the mayor would be proud of that as well. Staff, thank you guys for what you do. I know you prep us as best possible, and y'all don't know what script we're going to follow sometimes when we talk to investors and developers. But at the end of the day, we're respectful, and we're courteous. We're tough. We ask tough questions, and I know we didn't let you guys down tonight. So, but thank you all. Thank you guys for being easy on me tonight, too, as I pinch hit. So. Thanks. Mr. Dunning.
Couple quick items. Last Friday, we had what we call our all-hands meeting, where we get as many of our team members together in one location to reflect on the past year and our accomplishments and recognize employee efforts. So we held that meeting at St. Michael's the Archangel. We recognized our employees of the year. The way we're doing that is for our core values, stewardship, integrity, and service excellence. So we have an employee of the year for each one of those. Proud to announce Kara Starlin was recognized for the stewardship core value. She's our environmental specialist in public works. For the integrity core value was Larry Baker out of our ITS department. He's an applications analyst. For service excellence, it was Cynthia Stacks who was recognized. She's an applications administrator in ITS. And then we also do a team of the year. And this year's recognized folks was our budget team. So that's Rick Gentry and Eric Stoyanov, who have really put a lot of effort into getting our budget and our processes and our systems in place. And I know the Finance Committee sees them pretty frequently doing our budget amendments and keeping things on track and reporting on budget. So very proud of all those folks and the nominees, numerous nominees in all those categories. So we're very proud of their efforts and are thankful for their service to the community. I know Mr. Elam shot you all an email yesterday evening. We've learned that across the street on the Downtown Market Plaza project, they've been doing some remediation work on those buildings and pulling a few items out here and there. And then we understand tomorrow they will move into the demolition phase of those structures. So more of a public awareness. We've seen, some activity over there, but we'll really start seeing some things happen tomorrow across the street on that project.
Thank you. And just before we close, I want to acknowledge Chief Forbes. Dressed pretty dandy tonight, so we almost didn't recognize you. So well done. And Mr. Schaffler, what's the over-under in us getting out of here by 9? So I'm holding you guys between now and getting out of here. So it's my pleasure to say this meeting's adjourned. Have a good evening.